This fat guy was reborn in a primordial world. His name was Jake, while everyone else evolved with sacred weapons. He was an archer, a class everyone considered trash. But this guy was ruthless. He had no mercy. He forged his arrows like sharp spears to become an elite primordial hunter. In a world where you can't trust anyone, people started to panic about the end of the world. But for some bizarre reason, this boy felt very comfortable with the idea. Facing terrifying creatures didn't seem like the worst-case scenario. Besides, he also felt a great sense of peace while hunting. His path wasn't that simple, and at times he came dangerously close to madness. Before his complete downfall, he was an ordinary worker. He didn't have many social skills and did his best to avoid such interactions. Often our boy couldn't tell if people were trying to socialize with him. His colleague asked if he had a good weekend. He said it was completely normal. Continuing the conversation, she mentioned she tried to go fishing with her husband, but the weather didn't cooperate. Eventually, the elevator reached his floor. Alone once again, our boy was sure there was something wrong with him. Making friends the traditional way is extremely difficult. He's been in this situation for years. Everything seems so complicated for him, and social skills are extremely valuable, as they can lead to good opportunities. When he was younger, the boy focused on individual activities, one of which was archery. He's certain the world wasn't made for someone like him, someone who has to spend several hours a day sitting in front of a computer. No family, no friends in this city, not known by anyone. Jake was startled by the voice of one of his potential friends. This is Adam, one of the few people who is nice to him, a natural-born leader, practically the opposite of our boy. His ability to make conversation is truly remarkable. Jake usually turns down these kinds of invitations, but he decided to accept this time. Everyone is waiting for the elevator. Inside is Carolina, the girl from Human Resources. To our protagonist, she's a sight for sore eyes, one of the positive aspects of working here. She told Adam to be careful, or he could be fired if he kept wearing that thing, the tight shirt on his body. Carolina also noticed our protagonist and found it unusual that he decided to join them this time, and being called by his own name made our boy very anxious. However, relief came quickly when she changed the subject. Then everyone started to get nervous. The elevator they were in was having trouble, shaking violently. The vibrations began to increase dangerously. Adam desperately asked our protagonist to press the emergency button, but even after he did, nothing happened. The lights inside the elevator went out. No one could tell what was happening. It wasn't long before they were all surprised by a virtual message, a system notification. Other people on Earth are going through the same situation. And elsewhere in the universe, an entity observes the invitation made to these people, like lambs to the slaughter. Jake was taken to a room. He is completely alone, with no idea where he is. A silver-skinned cosmic entity welcomed him. Obviously, Jake was startled by this encounter. The entity said it was responsible for introducing him to this new reality, but they had little time, so they needed to hurry. Jake still couldn't understand what was happening, until an attribute screen appeared before his eyes. It displayed his stats, created from details he possessed, peculiarities of his own existence. His universe had met the minimum requirements to participate. Additional information would be released over time. The room changed completely, as if it were a mirror of the universe, leaving Jake impressed. The entity told him to pay attention to the classes. It was time for our boy to choose a profession. They could enhance the innate proficiency he already possessed. With that in mind, Jake quickly made his decision, becoming an archer. The time for the introduction was running out. He was about to be taken to the tutorial forest, a place full of dangerous creatures and an opportunity to grow even stronger. Beasts roam freely in this region, constantly hunting. After being defeated, they provide tutorial points. If he becomes strong enough, Jake can even hunt the beast lords. The tutorial will last for 64 days. That's all the entity can share. Jake started to feel the adrenaline rush through his body. He was excited about all of this. Inside this great forest, our protagonist's companions were also transported. Jake noticed that he had gained a small set of armor and a bow, but not everyone was like him. Adam was trying to calm his companions, and the ground beneath their feet began to shake. This caused several of them to panic. Despite the difficulties, other humans were also there, determined to begin the hunt. One group of survivors seemed very cautious. They heard something among the trees. Believing it was other people, they called out for them to reveal themselves. A lone boy showed himself to them, saying he had gotten separated from his team. Since he seemed harmless, he was quickly welcomed by the strangers. The boy said they were attacked right at the beginning, which is why he got separated from everyone. Since being alone is dangerous, they suggested he join them. They promised they would help him find his companions. This news made the boy very happy, but what they didn't notice was that the boy's dagger was already stained with blood. Back with our protagonist's team, they were trying to figure out what to do. One of them mentioned having met a very strange alien. It seems this was a common experience for everyone. Knowing there were more urgent matters, Adam tried to organize them. Leadership comes naturally to him, which impresses Jake even more. What they needed now was to find shelter, with water, and food. Our protagonist already guessed they weren't the only survivors, and a priority was to learn how to use their new skills. The team was very balanced so far. Adam immobilized an elk, and our protagonist finished it off with his arrow. After the battle, Carolina healed those who had been injured. At night, everyone managed to gather around a campfire. Carolina ended up complimenting our protagonist. She didn't know he was so good with a bow. This left our boy feeling awkward. Despite the hardships and not knowing what was happening, Adam remained cheerful, praising the protagonist as well. This time, he became very flustered, insisting he hadn't done anything special. However, this was a new place for all of them. The old rules were useless. They had to be very careful, and while some slept, a pair kept watch. Our protagonist's colleague said she was supposed to meet her husband for lunch, and they were just a few feet apart. Missing her partner, she asked if our protagonist had a girlfriend. Obviously, he didn't. The guy can't even talk to people normally. During college, he made two friends, a very extroverted guy and a beautiful girl named Madalena. Our protagonist fell hopelessly in love with her. The two of them enjoyed being together, and those were the best years of the protagonist's life, until he was confronted with the harsh reality hidden right under his nose. Back in the present, the likely widow who started venting is now crying because she doesn't know what happened to her husband. Jake feels he should comfort her right now, but he has no idea what to say. The grieving woman decided to take a walk. Watching her go, Jake never imagined Joanna would open up like that. This sparked something in Jake. Maybe he could use this world to start his life from scratch. After hearing a noise in the forest, a woman's scream, our boy began to rush frantically. Joanna had run into some very ill-intentioned thugs, and they want to know where her other companions are. Since the woman won't cooperate, she's going to have to get a taste of violence. And using his large hammer, the thug smashed her foot as if it were paste. At the same time, arrows cut through the air, striking one of the men in the throat. The other thug managed to protect himself with his axe. They are now on high alert, wanting to know where this attacker is. The man with the axe went straight for the source of the arrows, but found no one in the bushes. Our protagonist was already behind him, and with one of his arrows, he nearly ended the thug's life. But the cut was too shallow. The battle will drag on for a few more minutes. The axeman pressures our protagonist, who's cornered. Joanna was in so much pain that she passed out, and the other attacker has vanished too. It was then that our protagonist realized he was being trapped. He's just moments away from finding out what lies beyond death, because in this situation, there's nothing he can do. During this moment of crisis, something unprecedented happened. Jake began to feel reality shift. Time started to slow down. His bloodline has just awakened, the lineage of the primal hunter. His instincts took the wheel. Jake dodged the blow, and even managed to catch one of his arrows, gravely injuring one of his assailants. Even so, our boy can't tell what's happening. In the next second, he grabbed a sword that had fallen to the ground, ending the life of the other extra. Now, several arrows are flying towards our boy, but he blocked all of them by wielding the blade. It's time for this hidden attacker to reveal himself. A young man emerges from the bushes, completely desperate. He manages to grab our protagonist by the clothes, and is desperate to end his life immediately. But all he managed to do was take the tip of an arrow to one of his eyes. His life was ended. Completely enraged, Jake keeps striking his attacker, and he did so several times, until his team finally reached the clearing, having heard what happened. Seeing two bodies on the ground, they still can't understand what happened. To make matters worse, Jake has a grim expression on his face, saying that he had won. Now, a flashback of our warrior. Back when he was just a student, he saw a girl being victimized by some jerks. That stirred a strange feeling in Jake. He didn't want to tolerate that kind of behavior. The jerks continued to harass the girl. This made Jake attack them immediately. He managed to knock down one of those thugs, and it was then that he noticed something interesting. To the girl, the victim, they were all friends of violence, people she despised. Both students received a suspension, from which he learned that there's no difference between violent actions. Back in the present, Caroline is very worried about him because there's so much blood in that place. Full of pride, Jake said that the blood wasn't his. For taking a few lives, our boy received tutorial points. Only then did he notice his new skill, the primal hunter bloodline, which heightens his perception of reality. Adam wants to know who those people were and why they attacked. To our protagonist, they were just after tutorial points. Caroline managed to heal Joanna's leg, but after what happened, they all realized they need a safe place. A firm voice called our protagonist by name. Caroline wants to know why Joanna was alone. Our boy said she was anxious and seemed to need some space. This answer didn't please Caroline. For God's sake, I hope she goes to hell. In a few chapters, you'll understand that Caroline is a bitch. Now she's complaining, saying what happened is our boy's fault. Adam had to intervene in the middle of her tirade, and being much more reasonable, he asked why our protagonist let the girl stay alone. He could have woken one of them up. Jake said everything happened too fast, and that they are all prone to error. In fact, one of them could have died. Even so, Caroline continues to act like a bitch, saying Joanna might not be here anymore. Completely revolted, Jake asked if she has any idea what's going on. Joanna is only alive because of what he did. There was no time to ask for help. This world is cruel, and those people wanted to wipe them out. The only question is if they have the balls to do the same. Life isn't a grape anymore. It's a worn-out teat, sucked dry until there's nothing left. After this motivational speech, their other colleague asked what they should do. Jake told them to do whatever they want, as long as they can level up and get out of this hell. He just didn't want to be blamed for his teammates doing nothing. The next morning, our protagonist went to talk to Casper. According to the boy, everyone reached a consensus after a brief chat. They need to be responsible for their own actions. In the past, these two used to be friends and helped each other at work. Besides, they struggled to meet women in real life. Now the difficulties are different. Unfortunately, Joanna lost part of her leg and now uses a makeshift prosthesis. They hope Caroline can learn a more powerful healing magic to change this situation. After what happened, the group seems more determined to keep hunting. Joanna and Bertram are good fighters, the best after our protagonist. Caroline is also very impressive, despite being a complete bitch. After what happened with Joanna, it seems something has changed inside that woman. In the starter items, there were healing potions, but they ran out quickly. Caroline's magic is proving very useful. Since the incident, she hasn't spoken to our protagonist. This makes our boy even more anxious, until he decided to pretend nothing happened. After a few hours, he and Casper shifted their focus to something else. Blindfolded, Jake is going to try to dodge some mud balls, but all he got out of it was dirty clothes. Our boy is trying to use his new skill, and perhaps his perception only responds to real dangers. Adam tried to gather everyone, saying they need to set up shelter for the night. They found a cave that seems safe. At least it will protect them from the rain, but it could also be a trap if they're ambushed. Our protagonist now considers all the variables, because in a way, he carries the burden of what happened to Joanna's leg. Adam knows things must not be easy for him, and our boy said he doesn't want to repeat the same mistakes. This made Adam apologize to our boy, stating he shouldn't feel that way. But now, they need to explore the cave to make sure it's safe. Jake realized that if it weren't for his friend's leadership, this group wouldn't last long. Although, if it weren't for him, our boy wouldn't even be in this forest. In the past, it was Adam who invited him to be part of his team. That eventually led to the first lunch invitation, and the rest, as they say, is history. Now they are all deep in this forest, inside a damp cave. The group was surprised by a sudden earth tremor. Boulders began to fall from the ceiling. Jake understood they needed to escape immediately, and even the woman with only one leg ran like an Olympic sprinter. The rocks are falling in abundance. Jake saw that Caroline was in trouble, as she's slower than the woman with only one leg. Her head is moments away from being crushed by the boulders. This obviously awakened something in our protagonist, who is now moving at the speed of light. With this adrenaline rush, he managed to save Caroline's life, the bitch. Lots of debris fell behind them. It would have been fatal. Unfortunately, the group was now split in two. At least everyone is still alive and safe. Behind the rocks, Adam tries to contact his friends. They can communicate through the rocks, but they're making too much noise. Jake told Caroline to shut up, as the place had proven to be very unstable. Not to mention, they have no idea what could be hiding there. Using her power of stating the obvious, Caroline realized the rocks are too big to be moved. On the other side, stupid ideas are brewing. They want to break the rocks, but Adam didn't let that happen. Joanna is already terrified. She doesn't want to lose her companions. Since the cave is very large, Adam suggested finding another route. Perhaps that's the safest way out for all of them. Agreeing, Jake said they'll explore the cave a bit more and try to find them on the other side. But what terrifies him is not knowing what creatures are hidden in that place. Not to mention he has to protect Caroline. Full of confidence and empowerment, Caroline leads the way, saying everything will be okay, because she refuses to die in a cave like this. Jake liked that protagonist-like optimism. After an hour, they still hadn't met up with the others, but the main group believes they'll survive. Caroline is a healer, while Jake is the strongest in the group, so they can worry a little less knowing that. Another important thing is that they all saw what happened in the middle of the forest. Our protagonist was in a pool of blood, smiling like a maniac. Adam believes he was in shock. Anyone could react that way in a situation like that. However, the guy with the sword said the crisis could change them all, and that right now our protagonist might be dangerous. Adam didn't like that word and said he'd trust his friend with glasses. Back to our protagonist, Caroline noticed he had injured one of his arms. Jake hadn't even noticed, but thinks it was from the fall earlier. Ready to use her powers, Caroline prepares to heal him. Quite confused, our guy asked if she wasn't upset with him. Caroline replied that one thing has nothing to do with the other. Not to mention she needs him to stay alive. Being so socially awkward, Jake has no idea what to say in this situation. So, Caroline told him he should be more careful, because even though he's strong, he's not invincible. Not to mention her magic is very limited. She can't heal everything. Now that they're talking, Jake worked up the courage to ask her why she chose to be a healer. The woman asked him the same question. Why did our guy want to be an archer? According to our guy, he just opted for the most useful choice to survive, and that was Caroline's motivation as well. She doesn't know much about this tutorial, but she's played enough games to understand that a healer is always useful. Jake was surprised to find out she liked games. It all started when she was a kid. Her younger brother spent a lot of time in the hospital. For many weeks, she couldn't visit him, so that's how they started playing online games. Jake never imagined his colleague had a brother. Caroline explained, upset, that she was always forced to be the healer because she was a girl. At first, she hated it because she wanted to be a warrior, since everyone wants to deal a lot of damage. But she soon realized that warriors always have a hard time finding teams. However, as a healer, she always became highly sought after. Not knowing who she might find in the forest, she was sure that by being a healer, she wouldn't be left alone, and consequently, she would survive. Our protagonist agreed that her line of reasoning is smart. Caroline said she's not as foolish as she looks. This made our protagonist rethink a few things about her. He had never seen Caroline as a person, only as a co-worker. Finally, his wound was treated. Now the pair needs to keep moving through the cave. In the darkness, they found a fork in the path. Caroline doesn't know which way they should go. Our protagonist, on the other hand, seems to be coldly analyzing the possibilities. He felt something very strange and asked if his colleague felt it too. Her perception hasn't been activated yet, but he could feel something down one of those paths. Several eyes are hidden in the darkness, and our protagonist was sure that something terrifying is hidden in that place. This is a very new sensation for our protagonist. His instincts are telling him to be cautious, but there's something in his heart that wants to meet the danger. So he called for Caroline to go deeper into the cave. The eyes are hidden in the darkness, and the logic is simple. They'll get a lot of experience points. Caroline thinks it's too risky. The priority is to find the rest of the team. However, Jake said this might be the way to find them. Even so, Caroline remains averse to the danger. This reminds our protagonist that getting tutorial points is important for survival. But that logic isn't enough for Caroline. And indeed, this is an overly risky move given the circumstances. The only thing our guy wants is to fight. Even though it's fun for him, Caroline wants to prioritize her own survival. On the other hand, Jake also wants to get stronger and stronger, and there's nothing wrong with that. They need to seize this opportunity now, as they can do superhuman things. Settling for mere survival is not enough. Caroline said she liked life the way it was before. She doesn't like the idea of having to become a killer. She told our protagonist to think more about the group and less about his selfish desires. That's when our guy realized he wouldn't get anywhere this way. He agreed to take the safer path. This made Caroline thank him. Inside the same cave, the rest of the team is still worried about them. Casper believes they're fine. The main difficulty is navigating the dark place. Even though his perception is very high, he's having trouble seeing in there. The team is at an impasse, whether to stop and rest or to continue exploring the cave. One of them said it's very prudent to stop for the night. They also have to consider Joanna's physical limitations. Imagining she's being a burden to everyone, she said she's fine. Adam has a lot to consider. He's thinking about his friend's safety. Ahead of them, the path remains silent and dark. That's when they started to hear a very faint noise. Preparing for the worst, they put out the torch and hid. Casper is still completely unable to identify anything. Everyone is getting more and more apprehensive, until Casper managed to spot something, approaching at great speed. To their relief, it's a familiar face. The group was finally reunited inside the cave, to everyone's delight. Worried, they asked if our protagonist had run into any trouble. Our guy stammered to answer, and Caroline said there was no problem at all, but they had to walk a long way. Now they need to find a safe place to sleep, preferably one that isn't at risk of collapsing. Joanna ended up getting quite scared. She saw a large spider and had to kill it with her staff, revealing her fear of such creatures. Casper said that arachnids are important to the ecosystem, and he decided to spare the life of another spider that had appeared. But while doing so, he didn't notice that several other creatures were approaching. They're spiders, just like the one he had saved. Casper tries to calm his friends, saying that most spiders aren't a danger to humans. Unfortunately, he's a fool. Adam still tried to help, but a spider ended up biting his neck. Now the group is in serious trouble. The animals are small, but they are numerous, and they've already managed to completely surround them. Casper revealed to his companions that he can't move, and in the deepest part of the cave, huge red eyes appeared. A truly menacing spider is ready to finish them all off. The group needs to start thinking fast. Casper is already completely regretting having said so much nonsense. Before they could react, someone hit the spider with an arrow. This gave Adam an opportunity to rescue the idiot who wanted to protect those animals. With his companion on his back, he told everyone to run immediately. Our protagonist, in turn, continues to provide cover for everyone. This way, his companions can get away. But our guy's second arrow was blocked by the spider. This menacing creature is already at level 3. Even so, it wasn't able to scare our guy. All of his companions decided to start running. They don't believe they can beat such a powerful enemy. Adam tries to call Jake to join them too. However, showing he's the real man of the hour, Jake doesn't want to miss this opportunity. Using a sword, he began to brutally strike the enemy. He slid under its abdomen, causing extensive damage. Caroline told them not to wait for our guy's craziness. However, Adam doesn't want to leave anyone behind. Jake took a direct hit. The force of the impact threw him against the rocks with devastating force. This ended up making the place even more unstable. And even though he was injured, our protagonist is still ready to fight. He's feeling something in his body again. It's his bloodline, renewed. He grabbed another of his arrows. The cruel creature tries to approach to end the fight, but it doesn't know that the real cruelty is on the protagonist's side. He needs to be quick because the cave is about to collapse. Jake, filled with hatred and a desire for revenge, brutally fights his enemy. Life in his homeland was not pleasant. For others, this isn't a game, but for our boy, it's become his new purpose. He's going to get stronger. Adam is starting to panic. This cave is really going to collapse, but our protagonist can't hear Adam's cries. He's too far away. Thanks to his senses, he can even predict the attacks. They're getting slower and slower, giving our boy a chance to decide what to do. An attack is coming from behind. Jake has decided what he'll attack too, making a clean cut. However, it wasn't the spider that got hit this time. It's the hand of Adam, the fool, who decided to butt in at one of the story's best moments. Thinking he's the real protagonist, this asshole told our boy not to die in a situation like this. Now, the two of them are running because the cave is collapsing. The poor spider was left behind, as it didn't sense the danger. The rest of the team is already outside, and Joanna is frantic, imagining something worse has happened. Fortunately, Adam and our boy made it out safely. Caroline got very worried when she saw their leader come out with an injury. Jake started to apologize, explaining he did it by accident. This just gave Caroline more ammunition to talk shit, saying our boy shouldn't have fought the spider. That motivated the blue-haired asshole to talk shit too, claiming that an attack on a group member must be punished. Adam tries to tell them it was just a scratch, nothing serious. Even so, the extras are furious. Jake realized that to these people, he's seen as a social outcast, and the blue-haired extra is already completely shitting his pants in fear. Since the protagonist's self-esteem isn't very high, he started to believe their words, that he's useless to the group, or even a danger. He started to remember what happened with Joanna, blaming himself for it, or when he tried to save Caroline and put everyone in that situation. While they were still arguing, Jake heard something in the bushes. He readied his bow to shoot this person, who was approaching uninvited. A man in armor revealed himself. His name is Richard, and he came to investigate the noise from the rocks. He also said he didn't come here to cause them any trouble. Adam immediately warmed up to him. It's good to find other friendly humans. Richard is also accompanied by his men, and he reinforced the idea that he doesn't want conflict. Among them is that blonde kid with a shifty look on his face. The larger the group, the better the chances of survival. He said he would understand if they were reluctant, but suggested they join forces. Caroline seems a bit suspicious, and Richard quickly realized she must be a healer. She is definitely this man's target. Our protagonist already understood that someone with her profession is very useful. According to Richard, the healer they had ended up dying, and that was a huge problem. He's willing to accept anyone who wants to join him, and he's even willing to take just the healer alone. Adam realized that things could get a little hostile. However, Richard said once more that he'd like to keep things non-violent, because that would be better for everyone. But of one thing he is certain, he's not leaving without the healer. Jake started to get very nervous. He knows his team is exhausted. Maybe he could take this enemy down with a surprise attack. However, those other extras pose a great danger. Richard continues to be diplomatic, stating they really need a healer. As for our protagonist, he's already realized he won't be able to engage in a fight. Adam, not having heard anything, started to calm our boy down. He told his other companions that maybe they should join them. They should prioritize survival right now. Caroline is willing to do anything to avoid a fight. Jake was disappointed to see his comrades were going to join these strangers. And so, it was decided. Still confused, our boy realized this could be advantageous. He decided to ask Richard what his current level was. The man said he's already at 9, and some of his companions are past level 7. Smiling maliciously, our protagonist felt he had the upper hand. With a sarcastic comment, he revealed he was hoping to find someone stronger, because my name is Eat Shit, and my level is Shove It Where the Sun Don't Shine. His group was very confused by this behavior. They didn't expect Jake to be so rude. Richard was furious. as he thought they were reaching an agreement. Our protagonist said his friends would join him, but he has more interesting things to do in the forest. He told him to take good care of them, or else he would get revenge. Full of confidence, Jake asked if Richard really believed he was the predator in this scenario. Then he pointed his sword at the man's neck, making it clear the archers wouldn't be fast enough. If our boy wanted to, this man would already be headless. And turning his back on him, Jake said he would be watching them all. Given that group's demands, Caroline will certainly be safe. And if it keeps her happy, Adam will end up being safe too. This will end up benefiting everyone, one way or another. Jake is hoping his words had some kind of effect. As he walks away, Adam and Casper decided to approach him, as they didn't understand what happened, much less why our protagonist was going off alone. Jake revealed he has his own goals for this tutorial, but it's better this way. His friends will have a better chance of survival with that group. He also told them not to worry because he would visit them. Before saying goodbye, Adam decided to give him a few things. Our protagonist received those potions with great joy. He also thanked Adam for everything he had done so far. As our boy moves away through the forest, he's being watched by that weird kid. Richard gave an order to one of his men. He already knows what must be done, and from the extra's smile, he certainly won't live for much longer. With a small group, that extra followed our protagonist. His true intention is to pierce our boy's head. These thugs believe he must be weak, but they were surprised by arrows coming from the darkness, leaving everyone completely terrified. The arrows keep coming, and the bandits can do nothing. 2 are already dead. The rest of them thought it best to keep running. After gaining some distance, they decided to hide in the bushes. The extra carefully watches the area. Believing our protagonist will approach, he tells his companion to attack. The guy started walking through the forest, looking for clues, without knowing that true evil was already behind him. Our boy's sword drank blood once again, but it was all just a trap. That extra used his own companion as bait in order to attack. Jake ended up taking an arrow to the stomach, but even wounded, our boy seems to be having a lot of fun. More arrows are fired, but our protagonist is too fast. Properly hidden, he needs to resume his hunt. Hidden by the forest's darkness, the extra watches intently. The situation is getting more and more tense for all of them, until a branch snapped. The sound terrified the extra. Only then did he realize that what fell on his head was a rotten branch. He still doesn't know where our protagonist could be, but his questions will soon be answered, as true evil has just found him. The sword sinks cruelly into the asshole's back. Lying on the ground, the extra takes his last breaths. Our boy heard someone else approaching and told her not to move. Jake has now been completely consumed by the power of violence. Elsewhere in that same forest, our boy's companions are with Richard. Adam said they were just co-workers before all this started, and he was the manager, responsible for all those people. That's why he continues to protect his allies. Richard really liked that stance and would prefer not to be seen as a threat by someone like Adam. He also said he built a camp so that everyone could survive, and he is about to reveal this place to everyone. His base of operations is anything but modest, considering they're in another world. Caroline was very impressed by this. It's a very satisfactory camp. Noticing there were women there, Casper quickly realized it was the perfect place. For someone who was planning to sleep in a cave, this camp is truly sensational. Now that everyone is here, it's time to assign quarters for the newcomers. So far, they're being treated very well by everyone. Casper's attention was suddenly drawn by the sound of metal. A woman approaches them, looking completely terrified. The sound comes from her clanking armor. Richard immediately called for the guards, but that wasn't necessary. The woman is also a resident of the camp. She brings urgent news for their leader. Richard realized she had been separated from her squad. Still exhausted, the woman said everyone else was dead. Not understanding, Richard asked if there had been a betrayal, but the woman said her men were killed. This left Richard even more stunned. It was all the archers doing. He ambushed them in the forest. This story doesn't make any sense. Richard couldn't understand why the woman was still alive. It's because she carries a message from Jake himself. Regarding his companions, he was very serious about their safety. To make matters worse, it seems that Degenerate enjoyed every second of the fight. With terror in her eyes, the woman said, "Our protagonist is a real monster." Wandering through the forest, Jake realized he needed to set up his own camp too. He decided to take a look at his own stats. By defeating those jerks, he had earned tutorial points, reaching level 7. That was much more progress than he had expected. With that, he also received points to increase his attributes. Now he wants to strengthen something that is enhanced by his bloodline trait. The obvious choice is to improve his own perception. Another problem is his total health. He only has 1 to 3 of it left now. That was thanks to the arrow that hit his stomach. Without a healer in his party, our protagonist needs to be very cautious. While he was distracted, he ended up completely surrounded by wolves. But for our protagonist, this is a cause for celebration. Back at the camp, the blonde boy is trying to get closer to the newcomers. He decided to start a conversation with Caroline, acting quite shy. He told her he's not crazy like the others. His name is William, and he seems like a very friendly guy. Caroline soon noticed that he is much younger than the other men, and William said that's a problem. Being only 19, he's being overlooked, but he assured her he's just a normal person, trying to survive like everyone else. Caroline had just fallen for his genjutsu, imagining the boy was just another victim. The next day, the forest was littered with dead wolves. A small rabbit came to feed on the vegetation and was almost caught in a trap. At least, that's what it seemed to be. But in reality, it was our protagonist who had just woken up startled. He doesn't know how many hours have passed, but it's already morning. He feels his whole body aching, but now he's all alone on this journey. It's time to get to work. Capturing the rabbit with an arrow wasn't difficult, and to feed himself, our boy needs to hunt all these creatures, as well as fight off those who wish to consume him. With a single day's work, he has already reached level 10. It was at that exact moment that a glint high up in a tree caught his attention. Jake thought it might be a trap, but he didn't sense any danger. Since he wanted an answer, it was time to investigate further. Our boy climbed to the top of that tree, finding a small box that seemed to hold a jewel. This appears to be a system treasure. Inside is a powerful item. Jake quickly realized this is part of the world's dynamics. Inside were leather bracers. For him, an archer, this is a very interesting item. But there was something else in there too, an upgrade token. It could be used on the boy's bow, but that tool is already very useful. Jake considered the possibility of improving his own cloak, which was already very tattered. Perhaps this was the best option. Gradually, the holes it had began to disappear. This is now the archer's mantle, which can resist slashing attacks and also repair itself. It's not that impressive, but it could be useful in practice. Jake realized that finding another one of these boxes could be very advantageous. Certainly by defeating powerful creatures, he will receive powerful rewards. Unfortunately, there was that rock slide. Getting back to the spider might not be possible. But since this forest is so large, there will be other opportunities. After several hours of walking, Jake found another cave. Standing in front of it, he felt no danger at all. In fact, his intuition told him there was a treasure inside. With a torch, our protagonist began his exploration. He found some blue mushrooms that glow in the dark, and along the way, a very mysterious door. The wood it's made of is already rotting, as if it were very ancient. The system announced that a challenge had just been discovered. To access it, one must be level 10, have no profession, and be among the top 5%. It seems our protagonist meets all these requirements. Faced with another challenge, Jake doesn't consider refusal an option. Inside that cave full of mushrooms, Jake tries to understand where he is. It really seems to be exclusively for this challenge. He soon noticed that a necklace had appeared around his neck. It's an amulet for those who enter this dungeon, an item made for storing other items. While he was thinking about how he could use it, the necklace began to glow intensely, as if something was about to come out of it. It was at that exact moment that a small blue creature with wings appeared. Jake was obviously very scared, as he has no idea what that could be. The first thing he does is think of defending himself and tried to reach for his sword, only to realize that he is completely unarmed. As for the blue creature, it seems to be getting more and more aggressive, but our protagonist has already calmed down, as the creature is small and practically harmless. Even so, it insists on attacking our boy, saying it will also show him how pathetic he is. Jake was genuinely impressed now, as he never imagined that little being was capable of speech. A little startled, Jake ended up stepping on something on the floor, and this may have activated a trap. A stone projectile is heading towards his face. Still not quite understanding, our boy simply dodged the attack. The impact was so strong that it destroyed the cave floor. All of this was observed by the small blue creature, which seems to be amused by what almost happened. Jake also noticed that the spot hit by the projectile began to melt, a sign that this attack is very dangerous. Our protagonist asked the creature if all the traps in this place are ridiculously dangerous. In response, the creature said it doesn't know, as it was imprisoned in that necklace. Jake seems to have become interested in the story of this small winged being, but he has no time to start a conversation. Other traps are being activated. This forces Jake to react immediately. His top priority now is to reach the end of this corridor. Using all his skill, Jake manages to dodge the attacks while approaching his goal. Exhausted, he finally made it to the end and was praised by the creature. Jake started to get intrigued. He wasn't expecting to be followed. Responding calmly, the creature said it has nowhere else to go and has a lot of free time. Walking a bit further, Jake saw several platforms in the air, like a very exotic staircase. Now he needs to collect 5 silver mushrooms. At least he'll be able to store these items in the storage necklace. Near each platform, there are openings in the cave wall. They must be more traps. The winged creature suggested that our boy take a risk and try to avoid the spikes. But instead of taking the more prudent approach, Jake decided to trigger the trap immediately, to get it done as quickly as possible. Once again, stone spikes are shot in his direction. So far, our boy manages to dodge dodge all of them. Because of his bloodline trait, this doesn't seem to be that challenging. The winged creature is starting to be positively impressed with this performance. Since our protagonist has collected 4 mushrooms so far, it seems he's really going to succeed completely. Distracted, the creature didn't realize it was in the line of fire of a trap. She started to get very worried, as she wasn't as agile as our boy. Jake immediately understood that something dangerous could happen. Fortunately, he needed to get to the creature anyway, as it was right next to the last mushroom. And because of that, our boy managed to save the reckless little thing. The two of them rolled across the ground, escaping the danger. From the sheer effort, Jake had to lie down for a few seconds to catch his breath, and the creature thanked our boy for what had happened. But Jake scolded it harshly, stating that he didn't come in here to save some random citizen. Trying to apologize, the creature said it had been trapped for 1,000 years and wasn't very agile anymore. It was then that Jake decided to ask what it was. The creature is an imp, and his name is Cecil. After they introduced themselves, Jake asked who had imprisoned the creature in the necklace. He said the story was too long and that he'd rather not talk about it right now. And since he hadn't seen what happened, he apologized to our protagonist, assuming he'd lost the last mushroom. With a smirk on his face, Jake said he would never miss an opportunity like that. Cecil was impressed, stating that despite being an idiot for taking risks, our boy was truly talented. In the next stage, our protagonist saw several stone platforms. Below them was a dangerous sea. He has 15 minutes to get to the other side. At first, it seemed like he just had to jump from one to the other. It didn't look too difficult. However, in this phase, all his stats were reduced to 10 points, and he couldn't use any skills. Now our protagonist started to get scared. He began to feel the reduction of his strength and reflexes in his own body, and for the first time, Jake realized he might not do so well. To our protagonist, it felt as if gravity had become more intense. Through his status screen, he confirmed that all his attributes were at 10 points. Focusing a little harder, Jake tried to connect with his bloodline. He discovered that it was a part of who he was now, and his perception increased once more. Not understanding what had happened, Cecil asked if the boy was all right. He mentioned that the countdown had already begun. Jake knows he can't fall into the sea of acid for obvious reasons. There seem to be 3 types of platforms, distinguished by their symbols. The first one shows a serpent feeding on a mushroom. The second engraving is of a serpent that appears to have wings and is being worshipped. The last engraving is of a dragon. Jake believes this shows a cycle of growth, and he might be right. But so far, he has no clue what to do. Each platform also has a distinctive glow, which could be a clue. After thinking for a moment, Jake picked up a mushroom from the ground, stating he had an idea. To test it, he threw the mushroom onto a platform. As soon as the mushroom stopped moving, it began to be absorbed. Cecil realized it was a puzzle. The platform with the feeding serpent symbol had absorbed the mushroom. Clearly, our protagonist was onto something. His instincts were telling him the light from the platforms was dangerous. He needed to deactivate something before jumping. As his time was running out, it was time to take more risks. Our boy threw another mushroom, and now he was ready to jump too. Still in midair, he hoped he wouldn't die when he reached the other side. Jake finally managed to land on the platform, immediately celebrating that he was still alive. Cecil celebrated too, but he was confused. He shouldn't be rooting for a human's life. Following this strategy, our boy reached the other side in no time. He found another door, which was closed. And as usual, Jake was quite out of breath. His time was renewed. He had completed the first stage and needed to make this journey 2 more times. The door before him opened. Our boy saw more stone platforms, but this time a dagger was presented to him. It appeared to be made of bone, and our boy was finding all of this very strange. Looking at the platforms, he saw no serpent symbols, and he couldn't just risk jumping. Perhaps the dagger was the secret to deactivating the traps. The only question was what the winged serpent could do. Figuring it was some kind of cult ritual, our boy cut his own hand. He dripped some of his blood onto the serpent symbol, which caused its glow to fade. It was going to be painful, but he had just figured out how to move forward. Cecil, being able to fly, had already analyzed the platforms. Our boy would only need to make 3 jumps, but he really wasn't liking this idea. However, with time running out, he had to make the first jump. When his foot touched the platform, he slipped on the blood. This caused our boy to fall, and that could be very dangerous now. Looking at his hand, Jake realized the dagger had done something to him. With his body even weaker, Jake was determined to press on. He made the next jump, but as he approached the final platform, he felt something strange throughout his body. Our boy was in deep agony. Cecil quickly realized our protagonist wasn't going to make it to the end. This last jump was a little weaker, and our protagonist barely managed to grab the edge of the platform platform. The only thing separating him from the sea of acid was his grip on the stone. Cecil tried to motivate the human, saying he was almost at the other side. Jake knew that all too well, as the tip of his boot was already melting in the acid. That was the motivation he needed to push a little harder. Our boy managed to escape the danger, but unfortunately, part of his leg had been compromised by the acid. A wound like that would surely be fatal. Our protagonist was practically missing a leg, but he had to keep moving forward. He did his best to drag his injured body. Cecil tried to help him, but he wasn't strong enough. Our boy was truly using all his remaining strength to keep going, but his vision was already starting to blur. It was as if his body was becoming more and more poisoned, and he was losing consciousness. Signs of poisoning were spreading across his skin. Moving had become agonizing. Finally, the system notified our boy that he had completed the stage and his body was restored. Cecil was trying to wake our boy up, but the dungeon's healing process was still underway. Finally healed, Jake was surprised he was still alive. Even Cecil was celebrating, as he had been certain our boy wouldn't survive. Still, it wasn't time to relax. They needed to beat this challenge. One last stage, with a countdown timer. After so much stress, Jake said he needed to catch his breath for a moment. He really had almost died. This was the first time since entering the tutorial that he had faced death. He enjoys fighting and the adventures of this place, but dying in a pool of acid was not part of his plans. That he could never accept. Cecil agreed with our boy. He had been trapped for so long that he doubted he would ever meet someone else again. A little more determined, our protagonist said he wouldn't lose to this challenge, and he would leave it the same way he entered, alive. With this determination, he walked through the final door. This time, the platforms were perfectly aligned. Cecil flew over them and said the mushroom trick might work. But to our protagonist, this could be a different puzzle. He hadn't been able to spot any other interesting clues yet. The last symbol was of a dragon, and it seemed to be roaring with anger. But our boy could be wrong about that speculation. Then he started to remember himself at the beginning of the tutorial. Maybe the creature wasn't showing its anger. It could be a portrayal of the fear it was feeling. Believing he was right, Jake now knew exactly what to do, so he began to approach the platforms. Cecil grew worried, as the platforms were still glowing, and yet, Jake started running towards them. Making his first leap across the sea of acid, he landed on the platform with the dragon symbol. Cecil immediately shut his eyes, imagining something disastrous was about to happen. The platform did indeed break, but our protagonist was ready to move forward. The answer to that challenge was to have courage. Jake began to remember his past life when he felt out of place, and now, in the tutorial, he had learned to use his willpower. In situations where reacting was the only option, that's how he learned to be brave, to keep moving forward despite the hardships. All the platforms he crossed were destroyed, but that didn't stop our boy from reaching the other side, completing the challenge. The dungeon penalty was lifted, and Jake could already feel his body returning to normal. Cecil, who was now rooting for our boy, said he was a really tough guy. With the challenge complete, it was time to receive the hidden reward, and that immediately caught the boy's attention. He was taken to another room, filled with carvings related to snakes. Jake carefully observed what looked like a mural. It seemed to be telling some kind of story about a snake that started eating mushrooms until it managed to grow wings and fly through the skies. Eventually, the creature began to be worshipped. As its strength was exceptional, it fought against various monsters, until it finally became something as powerful as a dragon. The creature continued to reign through the heavens, becoming an even more powerful dragon over time. At least that's the story this mural seems to be telling. The system said that our protagonist had witnessed the willpower of a true dragon, gaining 10 points in willpower. Cecil still didn't know what that meant. Our boy didn't either, but he was sure of one thing. He'd like to fight that dragon one day. Even after reaching the end, Jake still had to walk through more corridors. Our boy stopped suddenly, and Cecil bumped his head on his arm. The creature complained that the place was too dark and he couldn't see a thing. Jake didn't have much trouble moving, as he had put a lot of points into perception. But that wasn't all. His bloodline trait was also getting stronger and stronger. His perception increased even more when there was danger. Now it worked constantly, within a small radius. Our boy didn't know if he should tell Cecil about this, since the creature was ancient and might have some insight into this ability. Jake said the creature could return to the necklace until they found a light source. Cecil immediately refused the idea. This made our boy ask if it was really that bad inside. In response, Cecil said the place wasn't so bad. He could even see what was happening outside, but once inside, he could only get out if someone decided to let him out. Cecil didn't want to be stuck in there for another 1,000 years. This made our protagonist realize the creature had been trapped all this time, and he said he would never do that to him. Quite skeptical, Cecil said that everyone says the same thing. Their conversation was soon interrupted by rays of light. It seemed very natural, not the kind produced by the mushrooms. Reaching the end of the hallway, Jake seemed to have entered a large library, and he had no idea where he was. Looking more closely, he noticed that all the books were very old, but as he brought his hand closer to them, something unusual happened. He couldn't make contact contact with the material. Cecil found a desk, and on it were several notes. However, our protagonist still couldn't interact with them. It was as if a barrier was preventing it from happening. There was a door in the library that seemed to lead outside. Since they couldn't interact with anything, it was time to move on. Moving into the next room, Jake saw several other doors. In one of them, our boy found a bedroom, and in another door there was a bathroom. Still exploring the place, they found that there was also a garden there, and one of those rooms looked a lot like an exotic laboratory. To Cecil, they had to be inside someone's house, or something's. There was only one door left to explore, and upon opening it, they found more of those same mushrooms. It seemed this was part of another challenge. In the center of this small room, there was an altar with a papaya mark. It looked like it was made for someone to interact with. After what happened in the cellar, Cecil was very hesitant, and our protagonist said the creature should be a little more adventurous. Jake placed his hand on the altar without a second thought, only to regret it immediately. A kind of spike shot out of that spot, and it came out with enough force to injure our boy's hand. Cecil was once again very worried about what might happen. Jake really hadn't expected a trap like this. His senses hadn't warned him at all. To make matters worse, it seemed he had been poisoned once again. It was then that another altar appeared in the room, and on it was a book with an engraving of a snake eating a mushroom. It was obvious to both of them that this must be some kind of challenge. Jake needed to become a malefic viper alchemist if he wanted to cure himself of the poison, which would lie dormant for 30 days, after which it would kill him. Looking at his hand, it really seemed like the poison wasn't progressing. Our boy could also reject the challenge. He would be cured and taken to the great forest. Knowing he could choose to give up made our boy more confident. Cecil wanted to know what his human companion would do now. For our protagonist, there was only one answer. He hadn't come this far to refuse challenges. Back in the great forest, some animals were being watched. Adam and William were doing it. It looked like they were hunting. The two began their charge toward the creatures. But the animals were not easy to catch, so they had to be cornered by Bertram, the blue-haired extra. This caused the herd to change its escape route, directly into the trap they had set. It was time for Casper to play his part. He managed to capture some of the animals. Only one managed to escape after all that effort. Even so, the outcome of the hunt was very satisfactory. William was ready to end the lives of these animals. He threw his daggers quickly. They were embedded in the creature's flesh. William celebrated, very enthusiastically, but somehow Casper ended up getting hurt by it. This made William apologize, stating that he hadn't aimed carefully, but Casper acknowledged that accidents happen. At least they would all have food for the next week. Adam also praised everyone's work during the hunt. Now they needed to take all this food back to the camp. While they were returning, Casper apologized for what happened. His trap hadn't managed to catch them all. However, Adam said the job was well done. They had plenty of food. Since he had been injured, a girl seemed to be showing a lot of concern for Casper, but the young man said he was fine, and now they needed to get to the camp quickly, which eventually happened, and the girl said they would see each other soon. Adam couldn't help but notice that those two seemed to be getting quite close, and his observation made Casper very shy. However, Adam said they were at the end of the world. It was natural for things to happen quickly. With that in mind, Casper asked if that was the reason his friend was going to Caroline's cabin every night, leaving Adam completely speechless. Despite the comment, Casper assured him he hadn't told anyone, but he was sure everyone must already know. Once at the camp, Adam went to the blacksmith to see how things were going. The man in charge of the armor figured Adam already needed repairs on his sword, but actually he went there to look for Caroline, saying that Casper needed to be healed. Caroline said she would do it, but at the moment she was getting some armor for Richard. It seems he's trying very hard to keep her on his main team. Outside, Adam shared that Casper already knew about the nightly visits. Adam said he was as stealthy as Jake. Caroline didn't like being reminded of our protagonist and suggested her boyfriend get over it too. However, Adam was still worried about our boy. It had been weeks since he'd heard anything from him. Even so, Caroline believed he must be fine, as he was a grown man, and he's certain that Jake must be doing something stupid and very dangerous at this very moment. Back in the dungeon, our protagonist is already sick of collecting mushrooms. Cecil said things would be different if our boy didn't need to eat so much. This is happening because Jake got a poison resistance skill, but to do that, he actually needs to poison himself. Not to mention, the only food available there are these mushrooms. Cecil said the moss can be eaten too, and even told our protagonist to try it. Despite the hardships, they're staying in that exotic library. Jake needs to continue his research to beat the challenge. Since they spent a lot of time gathering items, Cecil suggested they rest for a bit. But our boy's body is already suffering the consequences. As time passes, the poison is also spreading. The top priority now is to make a healing potion. Having access to all that material, Jake is learning to make new things. Injecting a bit of mana, he continues to mix everything. If he has followed all the steps, the mixture will change color and turn red. But after several attempts, he still hasn't achieved the ideal result. Cecil told our boy to be a little more patient. He's only been practicing for a week. Despite this, Jake remains quite determined. He wants to try one more time, saying he'd take another mana potion. Cecil warned that he would waste them that way, as there's a limit to their efficiency. As he said this, our protagonist's body went through a deep agony, enough to make Cecil very worried. Our protagonist realized the poison is getting worse and worse. Taking off his shirt, he could see the infection was spreading a lot. Back at the camp, Adam was called to Richard's office, who promptly thanked the young man for showing up. He said a hunting squad came back empty-handed that day, and they're running low on food. That's why he'd like to send Adam's team out to hunt once more. But he wants to send them to a slightly more challenging territory, something Adam's team should be able to handle. Knowing their own potential, Adam is a bit hesitant. Richard assured him that the most dangerous monsters would be his personal team's responsibility, as he cares about everyone's life there. Adam wanted to take Caroline, as it would increase the mission's safety. But Richard doesn't agree with that, since Caroline is crucial to his plans. Since there's no further benefit for him, Adam is ready to gather his team. But before leaving, Richard asked that Casper stay at the camp. The defense found a breach in the fence. There might be other survivors in the area. Since Casper is very good with traps, Richard would like to have him around. Knowing the reason, Adam confirmed he would pass the message along. Later that same day, Adam's hunting team managed to get several animals. These creatures are a bit harder to defeat, but finding them in this region is actually much easier. William is covered in blood, but happy to have gotten several tutorial points. Worried about the boy's condition, Adam said they need to take a bath soon, something William agreed with. Walking alone in the forest, William thought that he was already sick of Richard and Adam. They are just useless people, and he's already bored of staying in this camp. It was then that he heard a sound on the same trail, so he decided to hide. William saw other survivors in the forest. They are near a water source. It seems they are all washing up. William noticed there was no healer with them and started wondering how many tutorial points they had, but he ended up being discovered. They heard noises from the bushes. This left William infuriated. Those people were already prepared to attack him. William revealed himself as a poor soul, saying he was the sole survivor of his team which had been attacked. The woman with the bow doesn't seem to be buying this story, but William is sure his poor soul act is really good, until he saw an arrow shot right past his face. Even more threatening, the woman said she would never fall for a lie like that. The warrior ordered William to drop his weapons and back away slowly, and he immediately agreed. At the same time, the woman pressures him even more. William is now kneeling, slowly bringing his hand to the wand he carries. Sensing that something dangerous might happen, the girl shot her arrow, but William was already prepared to dodge. And using the power of his wand, he summoned several knives, attacking the warrior first, who used his shield to defend. Now, a fight between all of them is underway. Arrows fly through the air, much more numerous this time. William doesn't have the numerical advantage against them, and that team's mage is ready to enter the scene as well. This was enough to make William realize his enemies were stronger than he expected. However, he's already in the sights of the woman with the bow, and even though they are strong, William is smart. With one of his daggers, he managed to end the woman's life, who now has a huge hole through her neck. Her death left the warrior destabilized, giving William the opportunity to finish off the other two in the blink of an eye. Now the boy observes the rewards from that brief fight. His enemies were level 9 and level 10, so it wasn't a complete waste of time. The situation started to get worse when a familiar voice began to call his name. It's the girl in charge of making the traps. She ended up finding William among the bodies, and seeing all that, she became very frightened. This awakened William's dark side, as he didn't want to be discovered at all. A few minutes later, William found the rest of his team. Adam was happy about this because he had sent that girl to look for the boy. Playing dumb, William said he hadn't found her yet, and he hoped she didn't get lost in that dangerous forest. After what happened, Cecil went to gather some mushrooms alone. Upon returning to the library, he started looking for his human friend, finding our boy collapsed on the floor. And this left Cecil very worried, as something serious could have happened. He desperately tries to get Jake to wake up, noticing that the poisoning is spreading more and more. At least our protagonist managed to make several healing potions, and using one of them, Cecil tries to restore what little health our protagonist has left. Slowly, the boy begins to open his eyes, waking up very disoriented, not knowing what had happened. Cecil doesn't have an answer for that either. He found the boy on the floor, already unconscious, and even after taking the potion, Jake is very exhausted, which is plausible since he made many potions that morning, probably more than 50. Our boy is getting the hang of it. Cecil suggested he rest a bit too because of what happened, but our boy knows that time is scarce and he needs to improve even more. There are only 2 weeks left. The problem is, if he pushes himself too hard, he might end up dying before then. Jake is surprised by Cecil's excessive worry. He sounds just like his old co-workers, who always wanted to solve things the easy way, afraid of challenges. That's the kind of thinking only cowards have. Fed up with these words, Cecil knocked the potion out of our boy's hand. The contents which were already read, were lost. And for the comment he had made, our boy apologized. Even so, Cecil remains furious, stating that he is not a coward, making our protagonist apologize once more. Because of this, Cecil said that the boy will be the one gathering mushrooms next time. The next day, Cecil still hadn't returned, which made our protagonist more and more worried. However, he needs to continue his research to overcome that poison. Now, he has started learning to make poisons as well. The method for making them is practically the same. What needs to be done to differentiate one from the other is what you do with the ingredient's vitality. For a poison, he must focus on amplifying what is already harmful. Finally, our boy produced his first poison. Extremely enthusiastic about this result, he called for Cecil so he could see it too. Only then did he remember that he is completely alone. The creature had not yet returned. But since he had been called several times, Cecil appeared, asking what Jake wants. Our boy showed him the poison he had produced. Cecil doesn't seem impressed with this achievement, making our protagonist realize the creature is still very upset. Thanks to constant practice, our protagonist has already reached level 24 as a Viper alchemist. With his attribute points, he decided to increase his wisdom. All this alchemy practice is starting to pay off. Jake now has all the requirements to evolve his own profession. He just needs to accept the system's offer. This makes our boy think, maybe his alchemy will get even better. The system said the process would have adverse effects, and during it, he wouldn't be able to receive evolution points. Understanding that his progress would be stalled until he made this decision, Jake accepted the evolution, but after he did, nothing happened, until the entire library began to shake, as if in an earthquake. Very worried, Jake tries to understand what's happening. Cecil asked if our boy did something, and now, a mysterious wind began to envelop both of their bodies. They were taken to a completely different dimension. In the middle of that cosmic desert, Jake tries once again to understand what had happened. Despite it being a completely different place, his senses don't alert him to any danger. Even so, he felt a presence approaching. Pale, scaly legs are approaching our boy. They belong to a peculiar-looking person who didn't expect to receive visitors in their realm. Even though there was no danger, our boy's senses started going completely haywire, because they're telling him that this being is extremely dangerous. And once again, the being asked what they were doing there. Our boy tries to take a deep breath, believing he isn't in any danger, and said he's just as confused as that person. He was supposed to become a Viper alchemist, and now he's in this dimension. The pale-skinned man smiled and said it was nice to find our boy with all this nonsense, because he is the malefic Viper he had spoken of. Now he wants them to leave. Jake doubted this claim a bit, as this person didn't look much like a dragon snake. The Viper felt quite challenged by this comment, and began to make his entire body change shape. Transforming into a terrifying dragon, he asked if this was a bit more fitting. Cecil was completely paralyzed by this, as he never imagined being in his presence. The Viper asked if he knew the creature, and Cecil said he was one of his loyal servants. Seeing that the little creature claimed to be his servant, he must have been from before his own order. The young man, however, stated he wasn't his servant. He was just there to explore the dungeon. The Viper was impressed that the young man was going through this whole situation, because he had built all those traps many years ago. Hearing this, the young man realized he was in the presence of the designer himself. Curiously, he asked what Jake thought of the part where he had to be fed things, or about the part where he made him learn his history, only to be rewarded with a mural of him doing cool things. A rather narcissistic attitude, but the designer took that comment as a great compliment. Continuing the conversation, he asked if he was some kind of deity, and that's exactly what he is. Just keep gaining levels and you'll eventually receive your own dimension. It's a bit boring in the end, but it's very nice to be immortal. Having one's own dimension seems interesting, but the young man refuses immortality. The fleeting nature of life is what makes things interesting. To the designer, this was a logic that made no sense at all, and despite having this opinion, he said he liked it. Cecil bowed to the ground, apologizing to the Viper for what his companion was doing. He doesn't know how Jake has the courage to speak to a god this way, as he is terrified just being there. Not even he knows the answer, maybe because his willpower is great, but the Viper states that's not how it works. Status changes some things, but the mind remains unchanged. Willpower helps in facing immortality and its duration, but that's only possible if you already have those skills from the start. Many beings of immeasurable power have succumbed to the demons of their own minds. Some can never deal with it, and contrary to what one might think, time cannot heal all wounds. Jake noticed there was a lot of melancholy in the Viper's speech. Now he seemed quite saddened. He told the boy that the road to power is extremely lonely. Family, friends, everything important eventually gets gets left behind. Jake approaches him with some empathy, recognizing that the Viper must have gone through difficult choices. Placing a hand on his shoulder, he stated that hiding in that dimension wouldn't help at all. Cecil became desperate at the casual way he touched the god. The Viper shakes his head, saying the young man wouldn't understand the situation. Jake said that he ran because his own strategy wasn't working. It was time for him to try something different. Cecil is now sure they will die a gruesome death. After hearing these words, the Viper looked firmly at the boy, who, although apprehensive, waited for an answer. The Viper made a joke of the situation, saying the boy was being too emotional. That made him take a liking to the boy. Interested, Cecil wants to know what the Viper thinks of him, but the designer didn't even know he was there. They talked for a few hours. The Viper now knows his story, especially about Caroline. Cecil, who also knows the story, considers this a female archetype. The other two just watch, as if he didn't understand anything. They immediately laugh at his comment, leaving Cecil quite annoyed. Continuing to poke fun at the little creature, the Viper said the imp must have a lot of experience with women. Jake realized he must have ignored a notification earlier. A skill from his bloodline had progressed. The Viper asked what that was. Apparently, his perception had doubled in capacity. The Viper was intrigued by the young man's bloodline, saying it seemed very interesting. Seeing his reaction, Jake wanted to know if he knew anything about it, and if he could teach him more. The Viper replied that the system doesn't react well to sharing secrets. This has been the case since a minor god destroyed a universe, assuring them it wasn't him who did it. Disappointed, Jake sighs, as this was an expected outcome for his question. The time they spent together was a lot of fun, but the Viper recognizes it's time for them to continue their journey. That encounter made him reflect a lot on life, praising Jake because it's not often he meets someone with so much ambition. Excited, he wants to know if he passed his job interview, asking if he's now a true malefic Viper alchemist. The god replied yes, and touching Jake's shoulder, he stated he had something that would help him on his journey, a small thread of karma, and the boy's body began to glow. The Viper thanked them for their company. Jake says goodbye, saying it was fun. Waving his hand, he hopes they can meet again soon. The god knows his bloodline is very powerful, and he'll have to keep an eye on him from now on. Now he has other things to do. He agrees he's been idle for too long. It's time for the malefic Viper to make his return. This man said that they had sent Lyra to look for William a short time ago. He was surprised to hear this, as he hadn't found her anywhere. I just hope she didn't get lost along the way. Arriving at the camp, they are welcomed. The young man who greeted them asked what they thought of the new fence. Without answering his question, the group approaches Casper with sadness in their eyes. Finally, he realized that Lyra wasn't with them. All they could do was apologize. They say they don't know what really happened, only that she got lost in the forest. Casper shows he is deeply irritated by this description. The group searched for her for hours in the forest, without finding any trace of her whereabouts. Given this, they don't know what to think about what might have happened. Casper can't hide his irritation. This has to be a joke. The young man shakes his head, signaling that it's no joke. Lyra was gone, and they couldn't do anything. After hearing these words, the young man finally gives way to grief. A week has passed, and someone is presenting a report about William. Last night, he attacked another group of survivors. The chief presumes it was Hayden's group. His servant confirms that's exactly what happened, and Hayden's son lost his life during the fight. This outcome makes things even more problematic, but that's not all. William also marked the boy's head. He left a message for them, saying Richard says hello. Now it's just a matter of time before they retaliate. They found some arrows on the camp's perimeter. By the way they were crafted, they don't belong to them. Hayden is definitely after the person responsible for what was done to his son's body. Killing is one thing, but what was done went too far. Protecting William will be more trouble than it's worth. The servant is just waiting for the order. As soon as he's authorized, he'll take care of everything. He already has 2 of his men spying on him while they talk, but the chief asked him to stay in the shadows. He's seen many situations like this before. The boy is very skilled, although arrogant. If he can be controlled, he could be very useful to them. Without question, the servant agrees with the chief's words. Going to William, they asked if he had made any progress with the stone arrows. The boy had finally finished them all. It took him longer than expected, as he's still getting used to this new profession. The woman noticed his body was covered in grease. This made her hug him, trying to wipe off some of the dirt, but he said there's no problem getting a little dirty from work. The man in the background said it's a sign that someone is working hard. To the woman, it would be better if he had a tailoring profession. Even working with leather would be easier than this. However, the boy enjoys blacksmithing, and Smith has been teaching him everything he needs to know. Understanding that the boy liked it, the woman asked him to be careful. With a smile on his face, he said he would. Watching them walk away, he realized how annoying that was. He gets the impression that Caroline thinks she can tell him what to do. He's sure that if she weren't so pretty, no one would tolerate her annoying comments. Regardless, A war between Richard and Hayden will soon break out, and as soon as he takes out enough people and gets his bonus, he can leave this place. While he was lost in thought, Smith asked the boy to help him with some boxes. Full of excitement, he went over to the man to help him. Elsewhere, the prepared arrows are being delivered. He just doesn't know why Casper didn't go pick them up himself. They could use this opportunity to leave the tent and clear their heads a bit. Casper reveals that he doesn't want to see that person. The man who delivered the arrows assumed he was talking about Smith. Only then does Casper say that the person he doesn't want to see is William. The man knows Casper believes the boy has something to hide about Lyra's disappearance, but he can't swallow the boy's innocence. He's sure something is being hidden. Besides, Jake would never trust him. After the brief outburst, silence filled the tent. Worried, the man asked how long it had been since Casper slept. Annoyed, he told the man not to bother him. It's fine if he doesn't want to help, but if that's the case, he should just leave him alone. The man said it's okay to have some level of suspicion and that he never said he was wrong. Before continuing, he let out a long sigh. Commenting on the way Casper has been walking around the camp, it's noticeable that he looks at William as if he were a target, to the point of scaring other people with his attitude. They think he could snap at any moment, and in a way, they're right. That's why the man wants to know what he plans to do with all these traps, because they don't look like they were made to capture deer. Casper replied that there are many scary things deep in the heart of the forest, and it's time someone started hunting those things. Jake continues to do a countless number of push-ups. Cecil intervenes in the middle of the workout, wanting to know if Jake is ready yet. Even so, the boy keeps practicing. Realizing he was ignored, Cecil asks how long he's been training. Finishing his exercises, he said he only practiced for 30 minutes. Checking his stats, he wishes his progress was greater, but admits it's not bad for a month of training. Cecil warned him not to get tired yet, as the day ahead would be very long. Jake can't hide his excitement, as he's finally getting out of that damn cave. Seeing the young man's happiness, Cecil stated that he still needs to make an antidote, because the poison is spreading quickly through his body, and its effects could be fatal. He has about a day left to solve this problem, but Jake is confident that he will succeed. Inside the camp, William keeps himself busy with small tasks. He was interrupted by Caroline, telling her that Richard's armor would still take some time to be ready. But the woman didn't come to talk about that. She came to warn him about something that's happening. She asked him not to go near Hayden's camp from now on. Playing dumb, he asked if everything was all right, but things are getting intense. Richard said it's fine for him to go hunting, as long as he doesn't go near the other camp anymore. Receiving the warning, he said he would be careful. Caroline is relieved that the young man listened. She tried to give the same advice to Casper, but he's still resistant to listening. William doesn't know why this guy would be heading toward enemy territory. Maybe it's to set traps. Lately, Casper has been living in his own world, which makes him wonder how many tutorial points he's managed to gather so far. After the brief conversation, William assured her she could trust him, giving his word that he would stay away from the enemies. As Caroline returns to the chief's room, Richard wants to know how the conversation went. Caroline completed her mission. Now she's sure that William will follow Casper's trail. To Richard, it was an excellent job. Even though he didn't like things going this way, those two have been causing trouble for the camp. William isn't exactly a brilliant mind, while Casper seems like he could burn down the camp at any moment. For Caroline, the boy is just going through his mourning period. Richard disagrees. He disappeared for days after learning of Lyra's disappearance. He had gone into the forest to look for the girl. Casper shouts desperately, hoping to find something or some sign. Near some creatures, there's a body lying on the riverbank. It's definitely Lyra. He chased the creatures away and approached the girl. Kneeling beside her, he began to mourn. Saddened, he wants to know who was responsible for this, unable to accept what his eyes are seeing. Looking at the girl's abdomen, he began to notice the wounds. There was something there that caught his attention. She was definitely wounded by a dagger. He wondered who could have thrown them at her. Still trying to process his grief, he heard someone call his name. Casper called back, asking who was there. And once again, the voice called to him. The mysterious entity asks if he wants to bring the girl back. Desperate, he said yes. The voice told him to follow the sound, where he found a hidden dungeon. A few days passed after that happened. Casper returned to the camp completely different. His companions noticed he had changed a lot. Richard knows something out there made him change, and now he has trouble trusting him. Caroline cries at the situation as he used to be one of her friends. The tutorial is cruel, but it will soon come to an end. Once they return to Earth, they can rest and rebuild their lives. She had to be optimistic. Maybe Casper would manage to kill William and go back to being the person he once was. Adam would definitely be thrilled to have his friend back. This is the outcome they all want, and they try to support each other, so that in the end, she and Adam can have their much-desired happy ending. Wiping away her tears, Caroline began to wish she could leave this cursed place soon. Richard smiled, thinking how foolish people in love can be. Meanwhile, Casper was in the forest, seemingly in a state of meditation. He could hear a rustling in the bushes. As expected, the person he was waiting for was approaching. William approached amicably, introducing himself politely. But there was a certain deceit in his words when he said he knew he was expected. Casper replied that the boy had arrived just in time. They glanced at each other briefly, as if they knew what was about to happen. The meeting between them was practically a certainty. Caroline had warned him not to approach, but knowing the animosity between them, he knew they would face off. Acting cynically, he said he didn't know the reason for this. This only angered Casper even more, as he knew William was responsible for what happened to Lyra. Even so, he said he didn't care, because Casper was much weaker than him and hadn't been collecting any tutorial points. Hearing this only made Casper even more furious. He remembered the day he met his friend. He had been very shy during their first meeting. The girl had liked his name because it reminded her of a movie. Casper thought his name was stupid, but Lyra strongly disagreed, believing his name was very cute. That's how she won his affection. A week after they met, the two had grown closer. It was then that Lyra asked if he was interested in going out with her sometime. This took him completely by surprise. She apologized, saying she found him very interesting and didn't want to sound stupid in front of him. Surprising her, the boy confirmed he'd like to go out with her, but he worried she might think he also thought she was stupid, until he was surprised mid-explanation by a kiss on the cheek. Casper was truly devastated, for he had lost someone he loved. William scoffed at him because the boy had lost his sense of logic over a feeling. Casper's rage grew even more. By losing the one he loved, he had also lost his world, and now he wanted revenge against the person who did this. William stated that a fight between them wouldn't bring the girl back. Even if William didn't understand, he wanted to fight. Love is an emotion far too complex for an asshole like him to ever comprehend. William felt he was being provoked, realizing Casper's strategy was working. Casper knows the boy looks down on others' feelings, and that is his greatest weakness. After hearing this, William stated his patience was running out. He warned that if Casper didn't comply, he would be forced to fight, but the threat would only be effective if he still feared death. Since that was the case, William was determined to take his enemy's life. He threw several daggers at him. They flew through the air, only to be parried by Casper's spear. William hadn't expected the boy to be so agile and fast. As he was thinking this, Casper was ready to counterattack. This time, it was he who threw the dagger, but the blade flew wide of William's face. He began to smile carelessly, claiming that it wasn't even dangerous, until Casper revealed he hadn't been aiming at him. His dagger had managed to cut a hidden rope. That's why he had prepared so many arrows. William was relieved he still had some metal left on him. Taking advantage of his distraction while defending, Casper launched a fatal attack against him, but none of his strikes were able to hit the boy. However, by forcing him to step back, he made him step on a large trap. William had to use magic to free his foot. It was in that moment of distraction that the tip of Casper's spear closed in on him. Even so, William had no trouble dodging. Although his face was superficially wounded by the attack, it was necessary for him to gain some space in the fight. Casper was already a bit breathless after launching so many attacks. William revealed his deceit, saying that it hadn't been half bad. Now it was time for them to get a little more serious, using magic to launch several more daggers. A large number of them were revealed. Casper wasn't the only one who had prepared for this fight. William didn't believe the boy could defend himself from that attack. Unexpectedly, Casper looked at him with a smile on his face. He said he had met a man inside a dungeon. In the midst of his infinite grief, he was offered a deal. With open arms, Casper waited for the daggers to approach. They began to fall to the ground, leaving William very surprised. In the deal, Casper would receive great power, and this power would be fueled by his own emotions. He gathers energy in his arms. This is the power that represents the resentment of the fallen. William couldn't believe this was true. It wasn't possible he was going through this. Walking backward in fear, he tripped on a rock. Revealing his terror, he begged to be spared, saying he would leave the camp. To his surprise, Casper said his intention wasn't to kill him, he would merely be a witness. The power began to enter the boy's body. Apologizing for the completely unnecessary fight, he said that after what William did to Lyra, he needed at least one hit before he left. William didn't understand what these words meant. Casper said his goodbyes, wishing they would never meet again. The sphere of black energy grew to a monstrous size. Disappearing suddenly in the middle of the clearing, William was now alone. A few moments passed, and elsewhere a ritual was being performed. Casper appeared in the middle of the magic circle, saying that everything had been fulfilled. The mysterious voice praised his work. Even though the ritual was confusing, the boss was happy with his performance. A skeletal hand was revealed, telling the boy to stand up, for it was time for him to receive his afterlife. William still didn't understand what had happened, stuck on the fact that a boy had just ended his own life. Even so, the enchantment he had used was truly incredible. Power fueled by pure emotion. He didn't want to know what that meant, but he definitely needed to acquire it for himself. Meanwhile, Jake's time time to cure the poisoning was running out, and he continued to meditate. Cecil knew the situation was getting worse. He could barely keep looking at his friend. Jake must be in a lot of pain right now. If Cecil were in his place, he didn't know if he could handle his own fear. Even with his eyes closed, Jake asked the creature to stop staring at him. Cecil was startled. He had no idea how Jake knew that with his eyes closed. His bloodline works even when he isn't seeing. He can feel everything. Cecil said he's worried, and it seems like he's the only one concerned about the time. He wants to know how long Jake will remain still. The boy said he'll stay like this until he's ready. Cecil warned him that he should be practicing, as there was less than an hour left until the challenge ended. In college, many students would panic on the eve of a big exam. He learned very early on that in circumstances like these, the best thing to do is relax, as if he were about to shoot an arrow. The first thing to do is to take a deep breath. After that, you should prepare your entire body and let all distractions begin to fade away until the ideal moment finally arrive. Only then should the arrow be fired. Cecil asked if he'd tried praying, but he could see Jake didn't believe in that stuff. He assumed it must be a joke since they had met a god just last week. Jake said he doesn't see it that way, even though he received a blessing from that figure. Cecil was curious to know what it was, noting that it had been a huge status bonus which helped him in some alchemy sessions. Knowing the Viper, he figured if he prayed to it, he'd just be ignored. It wouldn't lead anywhere. Even so, he began to pray, telling the Viper that if he died, he would haunt it even in the world of the dead. The weight of these words left Cecil completely terrified. He got so angry that he started hitting him, saying the Viper could now end their lives. Jake gave a wide smile, claiming the Viper had liked that. It was as if he could feel some sort of encouragement from the god. After that, his body began to vibrate. Soon, he started coughing too, making Cecil very worried. Maybe the boy was wrong, and that wasn't a sign from the Viper. Looking at the filth on his hands from his cough, he realized things were not okay. Getting to his feet, he told Cecil not to worry. His story wouldn't end here, not after everything he had been through. Jake had faced a great number of enemies. He had also injured his body several times. He even had to say goodbye to some friends. Everything he went through would be for nothing if he couldn't overcome this challenge. Encouraging Cecil, he said they had a lot of work ahead of them. He began to prepare his tools and ingredients. He needed to extract the juice from those rare mushrooms, combining it with a mixture of blood and aged moss. The process would take some time, but he couldn't lose focus. Cecil brought him more ingredients for the antidote, and time kept passing. While he worked, he took a few stances to build up his stamina. If the potion was bubbling, it meant the work was being done right. Now he needed to infuse his own mana at a slow, controlled pace. He had to continue this process until he reached the next stage. The system notified him that he had successfully crafted an antidote. Cecil wanted to know if the mixture would work, but Jake wasn't sure. The potion was extremely unstable. In a few minutes, it would lose its current form. He wasn't sure if it would work, and he had only a few minutes to test its effectiveness. Besides, the time limit to complete the challenge was almost up. Knowing he had no other choice, he prepared to drink the potion. Jake swallowed the contents of the bowl in a single gulp. The process was harder than he imagined. Once the bowl was empty, Cecil asked how he was feeling. Jake replied that he didn't feel any different. The time to complete the challenge had finally run out. A feeling of intense pain began to spread throughout his body. Cecil became very worried by what he was seeing. Meanwhile, Jake felt the pain coursing through his entire body. That was the effect of the poison, which had grown stronger. He could barely breathe. In despair, he realized the poison was spreading throughout his body, and slowly, his strength began to fade. As the poison's effects intensified, he coughed up a lot of tomato juice. If the poison reached his heart, the result could be fatal. There would be nothing he could do to reverse the situation. Cecil went to the cabinet to get some health potions. Remembering everything he had done, Jake couldn't figure out where he had gone wrong. He had done everything correctly, but he didn't know why he had failed. His heart felt like it had been taken over by the poison. Unable to stay on his feet, he collapsed to the floor unconscious. His vision began to blur as Cecil begged him to hold on a little longer. Time passed, and his heart grew weaker and weaker. He saw Adam in a dream. The man asked if he was really going to give up like this. Even without any strength, Jake said he wouldn't give up. That's not what he chose to do. Trying to get to his feet, he declared he would fight the poison. And he was certain he would emerge from this fight as the sole victor. Jake stood up full of confidence. His heart was beating with renewed vigor. Cecil rushed to him in a panic, carrying several health potions. Jake seemed to have regained consciousness, though he was still in great pain. It was Cecil who couldn't understand what he was seeing. Panting, Jake guessed the antidote was taking effect. Seeing the spots on his body also disappearing, he confirmed he must have passed the test. Despite the suffering, he was alive. Completely healed, the two began to celebrate the excellent result. The Viper had seen everything they went through. It realized the antidote could have been better, but the boy overcame the suffering with his own will and vitality. What had saved him was his own perseverance. It seems it made the right decision in trusting this boy. The system congratulated him on his success. The dungeon would close in the next few hours. That was how much time they had to gather all their things. Jake didn't have much to pack, but Cecil said he had things too. The boy imagined they would leave that place together. Cecil hadn't thought about that yet and asked if Jake wanted them to go on together. The boy said he wouldn't leave him in that faulty dungeon. Cecil was still struggling to process the words he'd just heard, but the truth was, they had gone through a lot of trouble together, and because of that, they had become companions. Hearing this moved Cecil deeply. Jake couldn't help but laugh when he saw the little imp was crying, but they were soon interrupted by several system alerts. Multiple notifications were popping up. It seemed these were his rewards. There were so many he could barely count them all. 4 points in all stats, plus 4 additional points in vitality, new boots, and more storage space. Cecil wanted to know how he was feeling, and Jake replied that he felt very strong. It was a relief to have his weapons back. Since it had been a month since his last fight, Cecil assumed he might be rusty. It was possible, but right now he was more worried about his level. He had developed his alchemy a lot, but he was still a level 9 archer. Not knowing the average level in the forest, he figured he had a lot of catching up to do. Cecil didn't know what kind of help he could offer, since he didn't have a level or anything. If the danger was too great, he could put Cecil back in the necklace, but the creature refused. It had spent a millennium inside it, and had no intention of going back. After a long walk, the dungeon exit was visible. Jake asked if the creature was ready to breathe some fresh air. Finally, the pair was outside. They were met with a magnificent view of the place, much better than the dungeon where they had been. Looking to the side, Jake saw a dinosaur. It didn't take long for them to find hostile company. It would have been nice if they'd had at least a little time to appreciate the view, but Jake considered this a perfect opportunity. It was an excellent chance for him to put his skills into practice. The dinosaurs were between levels 17 and 24. He was surrounded by 4 creatures, all higher level than him, but he sensed only a moderate danger. He should be able to overcome them. The creatures began to advance, ready for their afternoon snack. He planned to separate the creatures and maintain the advantage of a ranged attack. He sent fatal arrows dancing among them. 2 of the creatures leading the attack died very quickly. Their bodies fell to the ground, completely still. Cecil warned him about the remaining creatures, which were approaching from behind. One of them had gotten too close, too fast. Jake managed to dodge the attack, acknowledging the creature's agility. He immediately started to wonder if the lack of combat had made him slower. Cecil was already in a complete panic, as Jake was about to become one of the creature's lunch. Unexpectedly, the dinosaur held back its attack. Jake took the opportunity to draw the sword he carried. The ravenous creature quickly shifted its focus. The boy still hadn't had time to fully draw his sword. Once again, he had to dodge at the last second. Given the proximity, he managed to land a slashing blow. It was more than enough to end the creature's life. The dinosaur fell to the ground, still writhing in agony. Only one more creature left to finish the fight. It was then that his perception alerted him that something else was happening. There were other dinosaurs waiting for the outcome, and they finally revealed themselves. This might be a chance given to him by the universe itself, a way to test how far his abilities have evolved. Determined, he is not willing to fail. The dinosaurs charge towards him full of speed, but Jake's determination is immense and he wants to prove himself against any opponent. Much faster than the creatures, he managed to cut down 3 of them without being noticed. He will keep fighting until he is the strongest. This time, another creature tries to attack him from behind, but Jake had survived the dungeon's challenge. That poor creature poses no threat to him. Jake continues to reap lives without stopping. Those beasts won't be able to stop him. The dinosaurs that remained alive are now hesitant. Since they didn't follow up on the attack, Jake advanced on them like a hungry predator, placing his blade in position, ready to strike. Consumed by the heat of battle, he shouted in a rage. On top of a boulder, Cecil does his best to stay away from the creature's jaws. At that moment, arrows start to whistle through the air. The distracted dinosaur now has its neck pierced. It falls to the ground, completely unable to recover. The conflict between them was brief, and there are no living creatures left among them. Once the danger had passed, Cecil thought it would have been better to stay inside the Momo. Jake acknowledges it was harder than he thought, but as he gets back into fighting, he assumes it will get easier from now on. Knowing his combat abilities are limited, the last thing Cecil wants is to become dinosaur food. Soon they are surprised. Jake had received a large number of tutorial points. As a result of the combat, he reached level 13 as an archer, receiving 4 attribute points. Seeing his formidable progress, he assumed he received extra experience for defeating much higher level creatures. Cecil stated that he would soon surpass the others. He had also received a new skill, powerful shot, which increases the arrow's strength in proportion to the time it is charged. The longer he draws his bow, the greater the damage caused by his arrow. A perfect skill for ambushes, something that will work very well with his alchemy skill, as he can use poisons. The combination of a powerful arrow with poison seems incredibly deadly. Once again, he is surprised by his perception. Cecil noticed his friend's distraction, but Jake still needed to focus because he felt something. He doesn't know what it is, but he knows it's miles away and very powerful. Knowing this, Cecil suggested they avoid it at all costs. However, Jake disagrees. No matter what that power is, it's worth fighting. Inside Richard's camp, Caroline continues to comb her hair. Adam finally arrives at the room and asks if there's any news about Casper. The woman replied that there was no news, but that Richard would send a scout squad the next day. The young man can't hide the sadness on his face. Approaching him, she claimed everything would be fine, while Adam remains worried about his friend. Everyone there knows that Casper had targeted William, and now both are missing. He asked if Caroline had heard anything from William before his disappearance. Lying, she said she hadn't, and that she would tell him anything she found out. She hugged him warmly, stating that it was a promise, but anxiety began to take over her facial expression. Inside what appears to be a therapist's office, they asked why William was there. The boy was court-ordered to begin therapy. The therapist wanted to know if he was aware of the reason for his sentence. It seems he lacks empathy and has violent tendencies. The therapist asked if there was anything else. The boy fell into a deep and fearful silence. It's been a year since he took his own brother's life. A year ago, his father asked if the boy was ready to meet his new brother. Distracted by his phone, he said he guessed so. His father wished he were a bit more excited. It had been a long time since the labor began, and it would be nice for them to cheer up his mother. The doctor approaches them and asks if he could speak with William's father for a moment. There were complications during the delivery. Everyone is safe, but the child is under observation. You can see the coldness consuming William's gaze. Only 1 day old, and his little brother had already started causing problems. He looks at the child, observing how pathetic it is. Time passed and the baby grew. His mother asked him to get the newspaper, so he went outside to get the mail. The boy started to look through what had arrived. One of the envelopes completely captured his attention. He had received an envelope from one of the universities he wanted to attend. Returning home full of joy, he told his parents he had been accepted, but they didn't even know what all the excitement was about. That's when he told them which college had accepted him. He applied because of his guidance counselor, as he didn't think he was capable. His parents want to know if the tuition will be very expensive. The boy doesn't know the cost. Although the news was really good, they can't afford that institution right now. William tries to emphasize that the university is one of the best in the world. They are very proud of him, but with a younger brother, they can't handle that kind of expense. Receiving this news left the boy completely devastated. He goes to the child's crib, who appears to have chronic health problems. To him, that little being isn't even close to a real person. The child, who can't even breathe on its own, had already become more important than him. To William, the baby is just a burden to his parents, and it was time for this little burden to do everyone a favor. It should disappear forever, he thought, as he turned off the machine that helped it breathe. Immediately, the small child began to agonize, as it couldn't breathe properly. It didn't take long for it to lose consciousness completely. His parents rushed to the baby's room, desperate, unable to believe what William had done. His mother shoves him out of the way to get to the child. William believed he had solved their financial problem that way. His parents are frantic. The baby is no longer breathing. William assumes all of this is pointless. The child was ruining their lives. His father grabs him, furious, not understanding why the boy had done it. Once again, William said he only did it to help the family. A year later, he is in prison. Introducing himself to one of the prison staff, he stated his name, receiving the medicine he had to take to maintain his sanity. Taking all of that every day makes it difficult for him to think straight. He no longer has any idea how much time has passed since he entered that prison, also unaware of the reason he remains there. William can't understand why he was abandoned by his parents. Gradually, his mind collapses, giving way to an even greater madness. It was in this context that he received the system notification announcing his transmigration. At first, he didn't know what it was about, but now he finds himself in the forest, needing to return to the camp. He managed to fool them all. No one suspects anything about his character. The only one who doubted him has disappeared. William is determined to find out what that power is, because he needs it for himself. First, he needs to recover. Even though Casper didn't want to kill him, the residual energy from that sphere almost finished the job. William is feeling an intense thirst. If he doesn't drink water, he feels like he could pass out at any moment. Coming across a huge lake, he believed it was his lucky day. However, he realized he wasn't alone in that place. He hid behind a rock to see who was approaching. The figure that arrived seemed familiar. He definitely knows this person. A few moments earlier, Jake analyzes the traces of the explosion and the residual energy it left behind. It was as if a very large bomb bomb had exploded in that spot. The person responsible might still be nearby. If he acts quickly, he'll find them soon. Cecil wished him luck, as he was now going back into the necklace once more. He could hunt monsters as much as he wanted, but the creature wasn't interested in losing its life on its first day outside the cave. Jake agreed with his stance, but asked him not to bother him once they got bored. Placing his hand over the necklace, he stored the monster. Finally, it had gone away. But Cecil stated that even from inside, he could still hear things from the outside. Smiling, Jake said he already knew that. But in truth, he was lying. Now at the riverbank, he was collecting some water to drink. He asked if the diabetes could sense presences while inside the necklace because someone was hiding behind a rock, but the creature couldn't feel anything. It could only see what was in front of the necklace. It asked if the hidden person was the one who caused the explosion, but it probably wasn't them. Even if that person was strong, Jake felt they weren't that strong. He decided to pretend he didn't know anything, as he didn't want others to discover he possessed magical items. As he asked if someone was nearby, William assumed he had been discovered. The boy revealed himself, saying it had been a while since he last encountered someone. Jake said he had just left a cave and was currently exploring the region. William assumed he hadn't been recognized. Perhaps Richard had taken all the attention in the past. The two shook hands. Jake asked if there was any camp nearby, and William said there were a few, offering to show him his. Intrigued to hear there was more than one camp, Jake asked who the leaders were. William said one was led by Richard and the other by Hayden, and that they were currently in a sort of war. Jake was bothered by this, as besides fighting monsters, they also had to deal with people. William said he knew all the safe routes and could escort him safely to Richard's camp. Jake agreed, thinking he could also learn about the other members there, as he might know some of them. Finally, the two headed toward Richard's camp. William was very annoyed because he didn't remember the boy's name. He hadn't said it at any point. Due to his perception, Jake knew William was a summoned individual at level 24. He couldn't trust him, but he was confident he could react if anything happened. At the moment, William was talking about Smith, who was responsible for the forge. Jake wanted to know if there was someone named Adam in the camp. Without answering, William suddenly became alert, indicating there was some kind of danger. Thanks to his refined ability, Jake could tell there was no danger in the area. William revealed he had a skill that allowed him to see hidden mana and claimed there was a trap ahead. Not knowing what he wanted, Jake decided to act cautiously. Noticing Jake was an archer, William asked him to move ahead stealthily to check for anything. William would remain behind to provide cover if something happened. The act was so bad that Jake struggled to stay in character. Still, he decided to go along with it, saying he trusted William. William was certain this was the person who had ambushed Nicholas. Revealing his completely despicable nature, he prepared to attack Jake from behind. Thanks to his ability, Jake sensed the daggers approaching. This made him turn his attention to them, bow in hand. He deflected all the blades effortlessly. Only a fool would fall for such a poorly planned trap. William said this tutorial was full of fools, and now he would end his life. But Jake started running toward the forest. William couldn't let him gain distance, as that would nullify his daggers. He intended to keep pressuring him to prevent his victim from escaping. After missing a few throws, he realized his target was very slippery, but he wouldn't be able to run forever. Suddenly, the boy was struck by an attack that deeply cut his abdomen. He still didn't understand what was happening, or why his target had stopped running. Jake was certain his pursuer believed he needed distance to attack, or thought he was just an archer. But one should never underestimate an opponent. That was a special dagger he had obtained in a dungeon. His victim would bleed to death. However, he decided he could end his suffering sooner. William fell into despair, realizing he wouldn't live much longer. Gripping his staff, he used a skill he had been saving for Richard himself. He used the skill Shining Steel. Jake was surprised. A strong, luminous energy began condensing intensely. Exactly 1 week earlier, William had gone to Richard to talk. He was having trouble with mana potion rationing and struggling to hunt, but given the situation with the other group of survivors, they might not have a solution. The boy wanted to take some potions from Richard's personal reserve. However, Richard firmly stated that if he needed them, he should ask someone else. Dismissing him, he said he had other matters to deal with. William pretended to remain dejected after the refusal. But in truth, it was nothing more than pure deception. While hunting later that same day, he grew increasingly resentful toward Richard. He decided he should try to steal all the potions from that camp. He couldn't wait to finally rid himself of all those people. All he needed was a bit more firepower and the right opportunity. After defeating a creature, he received something from the system. That skill emitted intense luminous energy and dealt damage proportional to the mana consumed. Thinking about his new destructive power, William became highly motivated. He used his new skill against Jake. A small metallic-looking sphere appeared. Jake felt he needed to get away immediately. It didn't take long for the sphere to explode violently. It also released intense light, forcing him to protect his eyes. He tried to move away while his vision was impaired. Due to the explosion's force, Several metal fragments scattered across the area. Some of them pierced the boy's body. The impact was strong enough to throw him far away. With what seemed like superficial wounds, he had no idea what kind of attack had hit him. Even with his ability, he barely had time to react. This wasn't the time to think. William was still a threat. He took the opportunity to flee as fast as possible. Jake knew he couldn't let him escape after what happened. However, his body had taken damage that might hinder his pursuit. His necklace suddenly began to glow intensely. Cecil asked if his friend was okay, and Jake replied that it was possible to block attacks aimed at vital areas. It was better to let the boy escape, as he couldn't fight like this. Jake felt like an idiot for being caught off guard. He already knew he shouldn't underestimate any opponent, yet he still got surprised. Cecil thought William might be responsible for the crater, but Jake wasn't sure. Having stayed in the cave for so long, he couldn't tell how strong the other survivors had become. If that was the strength of an average person in this place, he would definitely face many problems. Cecil suggested finding another dungeon to hide in, but Jake refused. This was the time for him to gain more levels. Meanwhile, back at the camp, the women were talking. Those gloves were very well made. They had been crafted especially for him. Since he had been working so hard, she wanted to give him a gift he would like. The other woman commented that the two made a beautiful couple. Seeing that reminded her of when she had met her husband. She was soon comforted. They didn't know how things were back on Earth. Perhaps her husband was in another tutorial, progressing as well. It was even possible that other tutorials were easier. Maybe he didn't have to deal with dangerous creatures. The woman thanked Caroline, but what she truly wanted was to see her husband once again. There are still 30 days left, and the number of survivors has already decreased significantly. Caroline believes that once all of this is over, they will return to their normal lives. A man suddenly entered the room, asking if Caroline was inside. Knowing she had been called, the messenger stated that it was an emergency. Richard needed her help immediately. She followed him, asking if it was really urgent and whether it required such urgency. Lying on a bed was William, his body badly injured, and no one knew what had happened to him. He had been found like that, lost in the forest. The boy was nearly dead, and they speculated that one of Hayden's men might have done this to him. Thanking the messenger for his help, she then asked him to fetch a bucket of water. He left the room, leaving the others with the injured boy. Richard wanted to know how serious the situation was. Caroline had no idea how the boy was still breathing. He asked if she was capable of saving him, since she was the best healer in the entire tutorial. Caroline could try, but knowing what they had previously planned together, she asked if that was really what he wanted. Richard had difficulty simply letting the boy die. Caroline confirmed that the poisoning was very severe. There was no guarantee she could do anything. William had already been causing problems for them. Perhaps they should take advantage of the situation. Richard had granted Caroline a great deal of autonomy, as she had proven herself to be a loyal soldier. But he was the one in charge, and he had ordered her to heal the boy, and he expected her to follow his command. Unable to argue, she decided to try. Caroline placed her hands on William's chest and immediately began the treatment. It was even more complex than she had imagined, but little by little, the boy seemed to be recovering. Richard didn't know what could have caused it. He began to suspect Casper, but Caroline disagreed. Casper used magic and curses. What they were seeing was definitely poisoning. It might have been caused by a beast, but the cut on his abdomen had been made by a blade. They began to consider that he might have been ambushed, but they had never seen Hayden use such a powerful poison. It was possible that a new player was involved. The situation was becoming increasingly complicated. Inside the camp, Adam was delivering some fabric that Joanna had requested. With a big smile on her face, she thanked him for his effort. Seeing a crowd in front of the infirmary, he asked what was happening. She said she had seen a scout looking for Caroline, saying it was an emergency. Adam thought something might have happened to the hunting teams, but the woman said no one was sure, only that William had been brought in. Upon hearing this, Adam was immediately surprised. Outside, Richard was pushing away the curious onlookers. Meanwhile, near Caroline, Adam asked what was going on. She said she had been on her way to meet him, but was needed for this emergency. William would probably be fine. She was going to move him to his cabin, as he might need privacy when he woke up. Adam said that if help was needed, he would be willing to do whatever it took. Caroline said it wasn't necessary, and that they would meet later. Without further words, Adam simply agreed. But he kept thinking that if William had run into trouble, they should at least know where Casper was. The more time passed, the less control he had over the situation. Even so, he couldn't allow hope to slip through his fingers. William remembered a therapy session from his life on Earth. It was a very strange feeling for him. The therapist wanted to know his opinion about the matter, but the boy seemed to have forgotten what he had been asked. His mother felt like she had lost both of her sons, and the therapist wanted to know how he felt about that, but being compared to the sick one made him feel deeply insulted, as if he were being betrayed. Once again, the therapist looked at him, waiting for an answer. Deceptively, he said he was sorry, but the truth was that he didn't care at all. He was willing to say whatever they wanted to hear, just to get out of that situation as soon as possible. Richard wanted to know if the treatment was working. William seemed to have woken up and realized that this wasn't his father. His memories and reality were blending together. Once again, he saw the therapist, but he heard something about tutorial points coming from her mouth. The woman asked if he remembered the other thing they had discussed, but he had no idea what was happening. Once again, she assured him they had already talked about it, the thing that was missing. The boy began to feel that familiar sense of dread, and the therapist said they had already discussed his greatest weakness. He was without a doubt a very pathetic boy, so weak and broken, unworthy of power. William didn't know who that grotesque figure in front of him was. Then he saw the one responsible for stabbing him. He was immediately terrified by the sight. Remembering the archer filled him with deep fear. He was unable to escape that feeling. Everyone in front of him was smiling, as if he were a complete failure. This made him feel even more hopeless. Finally, the boy woke up from his dark nightmare, but he had no idea where he was. Looking at his hands, he realized it had all been a dream. In front of him were Richard and Caroline, hoping the boy had rested, because now it was time for a serious conversation. Now sitting on his cot, Caroline approached him to ask how he was feeling. He had woken up in a cold sweat, very frightened. He said he felt fine, but had no idea how he got there. He was informed that one of the scouts had found him unconscious in the forest. Otherwise, he certainly would have died. He began to say that he had gone into the forest to look for Casper. Richard didn't believe that. He knew the boy had gone there to confront Casper and wanted to know exactly what had happened. William was clearly a bit foolish. He didn't understand how they had figured it out, even though it was obvious. He had been walking around freely for too long because he was strong, but he lacked experience and subtlety. Visibly irritated, he clenched his fists tightly. Richard said he knew his type well, a talented young man, no doubt, someone with potential that greatly interested him. Feigning curiosity, William asked how he had been evaluated that way. Richard said he had known since the first time they met in the forest. To him, those were the eyes of a living weapon. Thinking Richard wanted him as a soldier, William gestured that he wasn't interested in just that. But Richard didn't want him as a mere soldier. He wanted him as part of his elite force. He said that he and Caroline would support him in the forest. What they were proposing was a partnership. Still unconvinced, William asked what would stop him from killing them right there. Indeed, defeating them would grant him tutorial points and levels, but as a partner, he would be far more valuable. Immediately, the boy formed a subtle smile. Because he had finally found someone who recognized his true worth, they shook hands, marking the beginning of a very suspicious partnership. As they left, Richard asked Caroline to accompany him, allowing the boy to recover fully, but William didn't like being left alone without any supervision. He remembered that they were now partners. He could do as he pleased, and once recovered, they could discuss who had attacked him in the forest. Knowing this was a partnership where he had the advantage, he still struggled to believe what had happened. Outside, they commented that everything had gone as planned. Richard boasted about his ability to understand young people who thought they were too complicated. All it took was saying the right words, and they could be easily manipulated. An hour earlier, they had been discussing how to approach William. He understood Caroline's position, that they should eliminate him, but there were other ways to use him. At first, the woman was quite intrigued, but that boy was very arrogant. He walked around as if no one could defeat him, and after being beaten like that, his confidence must have been shaken. She thought he might have matured, but Richard is certain his trust won't be restored. He'll wake up vulnerable and susceptible to manipulation. That's when they must act. They'll stroke his ego a bit until his guard is down. With shallow praise, they can make him a loyal ally. She's afraid they might be betrayed by this boy one day. Fortunately, Richard has the tools to handle it, a skill. Caroline wanted to know what this skill was. He told her he acquired it a few weeks ago. It was after completing a mission. The system wants him to unite the other survivors and eliminate any rivals in his path. He received a pretty cool skill that lets him know if any of his allies are being disloyal. Caroline was immediately worried. She wanted to know what the system said about her. Richard said she has been loyal since the day they met, and he never doubted her for a moment. Meanwhile, she thinks this conversation is a one-way street. He's been manipulating William for some time now, getting him to eliminate disloyal members of the group. It's up to him to keep up the pace, because that's what a true leader does. Outside, Caroline is curious. She wants to know what his skill is saying. For now, the boy remains loyal. He's not a concern at the moment. His progress might not be linear, but he's confident they can get the job done. Caroline is uneasy about everything that has happened. She knows Casper isn't coming back. That's when he reminded her this isn't about kindness. At the end of the day, William is just an animal. He's useful now, but he's still just an animal. You can feed him and cultivate his loyalty, but Richard isn't delusional about the situation. As soon as he takes out leader Hayden and completes the system's mission, there will be no need to keep the dog by his side. Now Caroline understands Richard's plans. Right now, he has a few disloyal members within the camp. There's the blacksmith who's still working. Bertram is also one of the disloyal members. And finally Adam, who has been very suspicious suspicious lately. Very soon, he believes he can deal with all of them effectively. Meanwhile, in the forest, now recovered, the protagonist is in the middle of a hunt. His target is an ostrich, completely unaware of the end that awaits it. The arrow is being prepared with great care, as his new skill is being channeled into it. Slowly, the power flows through his fists. He needs a little more time, but the ostrich seems to have a sixth sense. The imp appears just in time, announcing she's brought some mushrooms. This made the bird notice that someone wanted to make it a meal. The creature starts running for its life, but Jake had already charged enough power into the arrow. The projectile tears through the air, full of momentum. It hits the creature fatally, destroying a tree in the process. Faced with the destruction, the imp was impressed. Jake explained that this was his skill at full charge. She suggested he should have used it against William, but the boy replied that despite its power, the attack has flaws. While charging, he has to remain completely still. It takes a few seconds to deal considerable damage. This attack took 12 seconds to charge. He felt like his arms were going to fall off. It could be useful for a stealth attack. If he set up an ambush, no one would expect an attack like this. The system informed him that by defeating the creature, he had leveled up once more. His progress is getting slower and slower. He assumes the other survivors have already defeated the more powerful creatures. All that's left for him are these creatures that don't give much experience. Suggesting something he didn't want to do, the imp said they could go deeper into the forest. And the truth is, despite the dangers, Cecil is absolutely right. The problem is that he might run into the other survivors. The outcome could be even worse, finding out there's no one left there. He decided they would explore deeper into the forest, but would avoid any camps. He doesn't want to get involved in conflicts that aren't his. Cecil agreed with the boy's limitation, but deep down, she knows it's not the conflicts he wants to avoid. The morning unfolds, and they continue to hunt. Jake even managed to collect some eggs, and in the lake, he struggled to catch some fish. Then, in the early afternoon, he discovered a new dungeon in the forest. The entrance looked very familiar to him. Cecil noted that there were fewer mushrooms this time. The notice says he can enter and leave as he wishes. It must be less dangerous than the challenge dungeon. Since he needs to gain a few more levels, this might be his only option left. They finally entered the dungeon. His objective is to destroy the boss creature of the place. Entering and defeating a creature seems too simple, even if it's a bit risky. It wasn't long before he came across a giant badger. Cecil was apprehensive, but understood that Jake had found the creatures he was looking for, because those badgers are much stronger than the creatures in the forest. Worried for her life, she decided to go back inside the necklace, making it clear she could be called if needed, but she'd rather stay in the safety of the necklace. Since there are only 2 creatures, Jake is confident he can handle them. They are just small, ferocious animals after all. It didn't take long for him to fire the first arrows. The first creature's life was cut short, but he couldn't land his arrows on the second one, and now he has no time to dodge the attack that has reached him. He needs to prevent those dangerous jaws from hitting a vital area. Using his forearm as a shield, he took a painful bite. That definitely can't be a pleasant feeling. Seizing the opportunity, he has the creature right where he wants it. Pulling an arrow from his quiver, he drove it into the badger's chest to end its life. This was his plan all along. Since the creature's level is high, he received a large amount of experience. As a result, he leveled up. Now he's not as interested in defeating the boss. He's going to spend a few hours killing more creatures. He's committed to leveling up, and now he knows that a big part of the danger is the poisonous bite. Since he also has some benefits from being a malefic viper alchemist, the poison isn't a problem. This way, he can focus on finishing off the creatures without the risk of being poisoned. After a while, he felt he had gotten a good workout. This place is serving its purpose. From inside the necklace, Cecil asked if her friend had seen that. It had been a long time since he'd come across an item like that. A treasure chest was hidden in the dungeon. It was about time he found some good items. With the box in his hands, he opened it. Inside was a dagger of chilling wind, capable of dealing ice damage. When attacking an enemy, the victim will start to get the chills. Shortly after, he also received new archer skills, Twin Fang style. It grants a good agility and strength bonus when he's using a suitable weapon. He had tried using 2 blades before, but the second one was one of his arrows. Maybe the system is aware that he's more capable now. This dungeon was proving to be very useful, even though he hadn't found the boss creature yet. As soon as he thought that, a great roar began to echo inside the cave. That can only mean one thing. It's the boss. In the deepest part of the cave, he spotted a creature he presumed was the source of the roar. This is definitely the Nest Mother. The system doesn't show what level she is. There's also no other information about the creature. That can only mean its level is very high. Cecil said he'd had enough fun, and should consider leaving the dungeon now, but the boy doesn't want to. He remembered the AI that brought him to this world. It mentioned something about creatures called beast lords, and this one before them certainly fits the description. Cecil wanted to know what made him think so. Since the creature is too strong for its level to be seen, that must be it. At least that's standard video game logic. He could start the attack with a poisoned arrow, followed by one of his charged shots. He couldn't miss this opportunity. At times like this, Cecil deeply regretted abandoning the library. Now properly positioned with his bow, he hoped to end this with a single shot. The energy finally began to charge, and the creature seemed completely oblivious to what was happening. Jake maintained his maximum concentration, counting the seconds until it was time to fire. As soon as he reached the limit, he released the arrow toward the target. It was visibly more powerful compared to the first time he used it. Unexpectedly, the creature sensed the approaching danger. This made Jake very worried. As a result, his arrow failed to hit the target, but it grazed one of its paws. It's possible the poison would spread anyway. Knowing it had been poisoned, the creature didn't hesitate to tear off a piece of its own body. Positioning his bow again, he realized that a beast lord was truly a formidable opponent. The creature was already on his tail as Jake prepared another arrow. This time, the arrow he shot was a completely normal one. The creature let out a deafening roar. The sound waves were so devastating that they completely destroyed the projectile. It also began to affect the boy's hearing. He hadn't expected the creature to have some kind of sonic attack. Distracted, with his hands on his head, he was slashed by the creature. The wounds seemed extensive, as he also coughed up some blood. He soon realized he was poisoned. He had imagined he was immune to its venom too, but he was wrong. The creature knew it still had to eliminate the threat. Jake started running, needing to gain distance from the creature to be able to attack. He asked Cecil if there were any health potions left, but all they had were vials of poison. He immediately thought that might be exactly what he needed. He stopped running and began to draw the creature's attention. From inside the pendant on his necklace, he took out one of the poison vials. Meanwhile, the creature continued to trot in his direction. Throwing the vial at it, he prayed his strategy would work. He hoped it would defend against the projectile just as it had with the arrow, by using its sonic attack, because that would cause the poison vial to shatter completely, leaving it vulnerable to the liquid, which would continue on its trajectory. And things went exactly as he had planned. The creature's eye was severely affected. Even wounded, it began to scream uncontrollably once more. But this time, Jake didn't understand what motivated it to do that. From various parts of the dungeon, badgers began to appear in droves. They came from every possible direction. The mass of creatures was already entering the arena, ready to turn the player's body into a snack. Jake was already completely surrounded by them. The reinforcements had obeyed the call of the dungeon boss. Bringing his hands to his daggers, he had hoped to test them on another occasion. Apparently, he had no other option left. And because he was holding two daggers, the Twin Fang style was immediately activated. Thanks to this and the newly acquired item, the creatures posed no threat to him. They were being slaughtered as if they were stuffed animals. Even so, he didn't get through the fight unscathed. Although he was taking some damage, the creatures continued to be subjugated. One of them managed to bite him again, but all who got too close had their lives reaped. Several of them tried to surprise him from behind. Unfortunately for them, Jake noticed every one. With that, all the creatures summoned by the dungeon boss were duly annihilated. Now there was only one creature left to deal with. Taking the initiative, Jake wanted to end this quickly. The creature was not intimidated either and began to run toward him, but as soon as it got close enough, it received a grievous slash. Ever since he defeated a level 68 creature, he had received a substantial amount of tutorial points. Not even Cecil could believe the boy was capable of that. He was already out of strength, letting his daggers fall to the ground. His eyes closed for a brief moment, and unexpectedly, Jake began to scream uncontrollably. For completing the dungeon alone, he would also receive an additional reward. Cecil noted that the place was now a complete mess. Jake said he needed to take a nap. Soon after, he realized he had also leveled up as an archer. For defeating the boss creature, he received 6 levels at once. Stretching his body, he decided he should get out of there before other creatures appeared. Before he could even move, the system surprised him with another notification. He wasn't expecting to get another skill. It allowed him to become one with the shadows, but it could only be used while moving in a straight line. From the description, it sounded somewhat familiar. He was sure he had read that name somewhere in the library. If he remembered correctly, that was the name that referred to one of them. Cecil hoped the Viper wouldn't be resentful, as that would be blasphemy. Jake figured the god wasn't that kind of person. Besides, the skill was too good to be ignored. An hour later, they were already walking outside the forest. The boy was hanging from a tree branch. completely shrouded in shadows, until he suddenly disappeared, reappearing on top of a large rock. He asked Cecil to watch him as he jumped toward the tree. Once again, the boy vanished. Appearing in front of the tree, he ended up hitting his head. Annoyed that his reading was interrupted, Cecil said he quite liked what he saw. Jake put his hands to his head, feeling a considerable amount of pain. Approaching him, Cecil said it was very good to know there was something the boy wasn't good at. He imagined that in a few days he would master the skill, as the concept behind it was very simple. It's like revving a motorcycle. There's a bit of a thrust to it, but he would soon get used to it. Cecil was thinking it was more like teleportation. It's hard to put into words, but he basically becomes a shadow as well. The shadow jumps from one place to another in a straight line. The question he had now was whether he could pass through solid objects. Cecil was disappointed, as there would be no grand heists in their future. Jake insisted that the skill was still in its initial stage. Once perfected, it could become very powerful. Meanwhile, in the hall of the malevolent viper, a woman was celebrating a ritual. This has been happening for entire generations. No matter how many eras pass, their hope is as eternal as their conviction. Even so, all they had left was a single temple. The woman awaited the viper's return and wished for a sign. Opening the hall doors, a man came to speak with the mistress of the place. Very irritated, she hoped something important was the reason for her meditation being interrupted. The messenger said that the Lord Protector requested her presence immediately. This was definitely urgent, and she thought that something wrong might have happened, but the messenger had no further news on the matter. Once she received the message, she started to head there. This would be the second time in her life that she would see the Lord Protector. He had made a brief appearance on the day of her consecration as master. He didn't even appear at the funerals of the old masters, which made her worried and anxious, because it could be that something had finally happened. With many thoughts on her mind, she passed through the portal, presenting herself to the Lord Protector. She said she came as soon as she knew she was summoned. The man asked her to enter quickly. As soon as she saw him, she was about to ask if everything was all right, but she immediately noticed the obelisk glowing intensely. That had only one meaning, an omen that the malevolent viper was approaching. After several eras of waiting, he would return to elevate their order to its lost glory. The woman knew her faith was not in vain. This was excellent news, but it soon gave way to anxiety, as there was much to be prepared. The temple had to be in its best condition, and she needed to speak with the other leaders. She only wished the viper wouldn't arrive so quickly, that it would take a few more days. Lost in her anxiety, she noticed the obelisk was glowing ever brighter. A peculiar voice greeted the little ones. The viper wants to know if you've missed him. The elder can't believe his lord has finally returned. The viper apologized for the wait, but he hugged the elder, thanking him for everything he had done. The woman didn't understand this kindness, nor the protector's tears. She had dreamed of this day for as long as she could remember, but it wasn't happening as she had imagined. Wanting to know who the woman was, he learned she is the last remaining master, currently the highest-ranking disciple. Asking for her name, he learned it was Viridia. She feels very honored to be one of the people to welcome the Viper back, apologizing that she didn't do it in the proper manner. The Viper told her to relax, as he had only asked for her name, not for her to bow. In fact, he should be the one apologizing, but since he already apologized to the old man, he won't do it again, as it's not his style. He calmly said that it's all right, and it's impressive enough that the order still exists. The woman was embarrassed to have her head patted by the deity. The old man wants to know what brought the Viper back, but wary of the answer, he said he was just curious. The Viper is uncomfortable with this excessive fear and formality. He suggested they could have a drink. The master said she would arrange it immediately, and the Viper noted her enthusiasm. Answering the old man, he stated that his arrival is related to the universe. He asked if he remembered the dungeon he had created in the second era. It seems someone has finally completed it. That's truly incredible. The old man wants to know if the Viper has a new follower, but that's not what he got. As unlikely as it may seem, he had made a friend. In the middle of the forest, in front of a campfire, Jake is wondering what's worse, the fact that he's only been eating mushrooms for weeks, or that he's starting to like it. Cecil claims it's much better than moss and dust. Jake remembered that on Earth, there was a wide variety of steaks. He misses that a lot. He asked if his friend misses anything from his home planet, but there's nothing specific he misses. The young man had already noticed that Cecil is always cautious about this topic and has never explained how he ended up in the necklace. Since it's a long story, he'd rather tell it while drunk. Jake noted that at least he knows what alcohol is. In the middle of the conversation, his perception picked up on something. He ordered his friend to return to the necklace immediately. Seeing that he hadn't understood the command, he had to be more emphatic. Cecil still doesn't understand a thing. Stepping into the center of the clearing, he told the intruders he could feel them. They then reveal themselves, asking who he is and what he's doing in these lands. Jake says he's just an archer, that he's not dangerous, and that he just finished a hunt. The woman with the scepter wants to know if his name is Jake. Confirming, he asked how she knew his name. A large boulder of ice was summoned in that spot. She said she was doing this in memory of Mickey. Dodging the attack, he has no idea who this person is. He said there's a misunderstanding understanding between them that he doesn't know this person and there's no reason for them to fight. The man with the sword told them not to listen because Richard had said the archer was dangerous and had nearly finished off the metallic mage. They're definitely talking about William, and now Richard must have put a bounty on his head. There's no possibility of dialogue with these people, and the truth is, he would have liked to resolve this amicably. Unfortunately, these 5 clowns will have their lives cut short. The warriors advance on him, full of confidence. Jake dodges the first attack. The warrior raises his enormous warhammer again. Meanwhile, the swordsman believes he's reached him, but that mysterious archer vanished before their eyes and had already appeared behind them. An arrow begins to whistle through the wind. That was a sign that they also have an archer. The tree was completely destroyed by the impact. This archer also possesses the same ability as him. Since he knows the ability, he knows exactly how to counter it. But his arrow was blocked by an ice shield created by the sorceress. To his annoyance, the team was attacking in a coordinated manner, and now another empowered arrow was heading towards him. Thanks to his ability to move through the shadows, he managed to dodge it. This situation is going to be a bit more work than he expected. The warriors once again took the initiative to attack. Jake realized he wouldn't be able to rely on his bow, drawing his 2 daggers to defend himself. With them in hand, he defended against the incoming attacks. A hidden assassin waits for the perfect window of opportunity. Jake feels he's being increasingly pressured. Having been completely cornered, he has no idea what to do. One of the warriors knows he'll disappear and reappear, hoping to anticipate his position, only to be surprised by the archer's determination, who let himself be hit by the dagger. This left the warrior defenseless. The guy with the hammer wants to end the fight quickly. His abdomen was already getting intimately acquainted with the dagger. Seeing his companion being eviscerated, the warrior grew a little concerned. Even the sorceress didn't expect them to take casualties. Without even showing any sign of pain, Jake would like to know who's next. Weeks earlier, he had asked the Viper how he deals with it. He was asking about taking lives and asked not to be misunderstood. He doesn't want to do that to innocents. But in recent weeks, he had transformed. He went from being an office worker to a fierce warrior. He doesn't regret the fights he's had, but he'd be lying if he said he doesn't think about them constantly. The Viper then said he would tell a story to this little child. Before he became a god, he had just received his humanoid form. He thought it would be nice to try and fit into the civilized world. Before, he was used to dealing with beasts. They can attack and be lethal, but at least they don't lie, something that isn't common among the enlightened species. The deceitful and lying people were the real monsters he had yet to encounter. In less than a year, he was betrayed by someone he considered a friend. He gave his trust and, as a result, had everything stolen from him. In his innocence, he gave them the benefit of the doubt, only to be betrayed once more. The resulting battle was so violent that it ended in the destruction of 9 planets. You could say he overreacted, but the truth is that since then, few have dared to mess with him again. Jake was curious to know how he destroyed 9 planets, but the Viper said he would tell that story another time. What he wanted to teach now is that the young man should act without hesitation and never show mercy, because those who want to harm him would never do the same for him. The sorceress was terrified as she witnessed one of her companions being brutally put to sleep. Jake said that his name is now Morpheus, and he's going to put the rest of them to sleep too. The warrior, who had been acting petulantly, is now much more hesitant with his sword. Filled with courage, the sorceress told her companions not to be afraid. Concentrating her power, she told them to keep him distracted, as she was going to end it all. Seeing that this is her most powerful spell, the knight knows he needs to buy as much time as possible, charging forward impetuously to attack. His blade was neatly parried by Jake's daggers. He had to reposition his blade to continue his assault, but that archer wasn't going to be left behind. They both began to exchange a flurry of blows. Even so, the warrior felt his opponent was becoming more and more precise. Meanwhile, Jake was having trouble finding an opening. With his peripheral vision, he noticed something approaching. Another one of the power-charged arrows had been launched. The impact proved to be incredibly devastating. They realized he had disappeared into the shadows. Now he had to be found immediately. Even with the assassin's heightened perception, it was as if his victim had become completely invisible. His worries soon ended, because worrying is something for the living. Jake managed to finish off another one of his enemies. The sorceress announced that her ability was almost ready to be cast. The enemy archer started hearing some very suspicious sounds. He told the warrior to watch his surroundings, but the poor man had already been turned into kindling. Unfortunately, he couldn't warn his companion in time. Now he was truly enraged by the outcome of the fight. Preparing another arrow, full of wrath, he started taunting his target, but he was caught by surprise by an attack. His head ended up filing for divorce from his body, as they didn't have a healthy relationship. They had made the terrible choice of trying to attack the protagonist, Covered in menstrual fluid, the sorceress knows she's in trouble. The final blow is delivered. The sorceress charged up her skill to do a whole lot of nothing. Jake warned her that the train to the afterlife was arriving. She could answer a few questions and be spared, or she could find out if God exists. He wants to know why Richard and William sent that team to capture him. It's about revenge. Jake didn't understand this, since all he'd done so far was defend himself. The woman believes he was the one who ended everyone's lives, making him responsible for starting this war. He remembered William had mentioned an ongoing conflict. There's little time left before the sorceress boards the train, but since he's a man who keeps his promises, he gave her a health potion. The sorceress ended up tossing the flask into the air. She'd rather die than live by his mercy, but still, she answered everything he asked. Jake was shocked by her foolish attitude. Life was slowly draining from her body. Her body finally fell to the ground, inert, in front of a very confused Jake. He revealed the pendant on his necklace. Cecil wanted to understand what was happening, but Jake knew as much as he did, since he didn't start this war. It's hard to believe it was all a big misunderstanding, but Jake knows they were all manipulated. There's someone in that forest who wants to frame him. He wasn't going to stand by and do nothing. After the fight, they built a large bonfire, all to cremate what was left of their adversaries. Cecil wanted to know if he had any words for the funeral, but the young man just stares at the burning fire. He apologized, saying that if it were up to him, none of this would have happened, and no lives would have been lost. He doesn't know how those two villains managed to deceive them all, but he vows, for their memories, to put an end to all this. Cecil also wished for everyone to rest in peace. After this whole adventure in the forest, he had finally reached level 31. Receiving those system messages makes him feel dirty. It was as if he were stealing everything those people had achieved. Cecil tried to console him, saying he had earned those rewards. But for the young man, achievements are what he gets from defeating monsters. That dungeon boss was something that demanded everything he had as he pushed himself to his limit. But what had just happened was completely meaningless. Cecil said he'd already received the points, and it was irreversible. Now he just needs to decide what to do with them. Staring at his hands, stained with menstrual fluid, he became contemplative. He can't go to Richard's camp and demand justice. Even though he's strong, he can't take on an army. It was then that his friend remembered that maybe there weren't that many people left. But in the worst case scenario, there could be hundreds of them. For now, the young man needs to try and think rationally. He wondered what Adam would do in his place. Richard and the others had gathered in the middle of the forest. Adam is surprised to hear what they're saying about his friend, Jake. The old man can't believe a wandering archer is taking out entire squads by himself. Richard warned that Jake is no ordinary archer. He thinks he's trying to win the tutorial. The system encourages them to get the highest reward, and that might be exactly what he's doing right now. Hayden wants to know if Richard believes this archer was responsible for his son's death. The man stated that it wasn't his men who attacked his squad. They saw the bodies. None of his men could have caused that much damage. Even so, Hayden wants to know how they met this mysterious person. Adam explained that he is his former companion and isn't so sure he was the one who did this. His friend is a loner. He wouldn't be a complete degenerate to do something like that. When they entered the tutorial, he proved to be a skilled combatant, but they've already witnessed that many among them are also very skilled, and he believes there's a third party acting among them in the forest. Richard isn't liking where this conversation is going. Adam continued to defend his friend as there was still no reason to believe it happened that way. Richard told the man not to listen to those words, as Adam was still too attached to the memories of his friend. The evidence points to him as the prime suspect. Trying to convince the old man, he said they needed to be realistic and do something about it. Supposing he believed his words, he wants to know what they would do. He proposed they work together, forming a squad to search the forest, find Jake, and finish him. Hayden was still a bit hesitant about it. Nevertheless, he agreed to a temporary alliance until this was all resolved. Adam is furious. He wasn't heard, and he went there to try and find another solution. But all he saw were the two men finding a new target for their problems. Meanwhile, the real villain continues to live peacefully. After defeating a few monsters, he assumed the meeting must have ended. He is sure that his enemy will soon be completely defeated. For what he had done, he ended up receiving tutorial points. With that, he received a new unique skill. Now he can summon an iron spear, which made him very excited. A creature emerged from the bushes, a perfect opportunity for him to test his new skill. The poor dinosaur charges forward, unaware it's running towards its doom. The deceitful liar prepares to throw his spear. He threw it with all his might, hitting the creature directly in its neck. That new skill proved to be very interesting. He knows he was completely defeated the last time he faced Jake, but he's much stronger now. He began to handle what was left of the creature. With its head in his hands, he believes he'll be the one to win the tutorial. The temple mistress was surprised to hear that the viper had made a friend. It was unheard of for a primordial being to befriend a mere mortal, especially one who hadn't completed the tutorial. She must maintain the highest title within the order, and this man could be a threat to that. One of the priests presents himself, as he had been summoned by her. Since she's had an eventful afternoon, she needs him to get some information for her. She's looking for records, all of them. The man wanted to know if there was anything specific she was looking for. Her objective is singular. She wants to know more about the man named Jake Thane. It's necessary to find everything there is on him, as she will be meeting this young man soon. In the forest, the protagonist is looking for Caroline and Adam, but he doesn't know if anyone is there. A movement in the bushes caught his attention. Not knowing who it could be, he told whatever it was to come out cautiously. It was Casper, who was badly injured and had found his friend. Falling to the ground, he said he had no more strength to keep walking. Immediately, Jake asked who had done this to him, knowing that William and Richard had attacked the entire camp. None of them were spared. They all lost their lives. Jake began to imagine the scene where all his companions were no longer alive. Desperate, Casper wants to know why he abandoned them, because his abandonment is what led to all their suffering. Jake jumps up, terrified. It had been a horrible nightmare. He looks at his hands until he realizes none of it had happened. Cecil said he should start going easy on the mushrooms, as they might be affecting his brain. Maybe that's it, because his nightmares are getting more and more intense. Cecil had heard that dreams are the mind's way of dealing with unresolved issues. Maybe his friend needed to let some things go. Perhaps he was right, and Jake wondered what nightmares his friend had been running from. He confessed that sleeping was all he did when trapped inside the necklace, so he was already living his worst nightmare. He was already tired of wandering around those bushes. Then he made a proposal to Cecil. He would tell him about his dreams if Cecil told him how he ended up imprisoned. With not much else to do there, he agreed. Jake said the dream was always about his old friends. He had arrived in this place with his co-workers. He was friends with some of them, while he barely knew the others. At work, he was just a guy who did the bare minimum, hardly ever talking to anyone. But when he arrived in the forest, things changed quickly. He felt like he could have a fresh start in life. He was wrong. His friends wanted to survive, while his desire was to start a new life. This led to heated arguments. It made him go his own way, leaving his friends vulnerable to untrustworthy people. And in these nightmares, he always finds his friends lifeless. He's always telling a different person what happened, but there's one constant element. They all feel abandoned by him, claiming it was entirely Jake's fault. If he had stayed and protected them, he might have been able to change things. Maybe his friends were right. After hearing the story, Cecil tried to console him, saying it was a heavy burden to bear. Now it was his turn to tell the story of how he ended up trapped in that necklace. He wished it were a better story to tell, revealing that in the past he was a lot like Jake. Many eras ago, he was one of the lowest-ranking members of the cult that worshipped the malevolent Viper. He was a laughingstock. Even the novices managed to despise him, but he had a small group of friends. They always treated him very well, and in return, he helped them test new enchantments and potions. Thinking about it now, he feels he was more of a guinea pig than a friend. Until one day, they asked him to test the necklace they had made. And so one thing led to another. He was completely sucked into that empty dimension. Fortunately, he was able to observe what was happening on the outside. He could see the panic on his old friends' faces as they tried to free him, until they dropped the necklace on the ground and abandoned him. He remembers the dust that gathered on the pendant over the years. Sometimes someone would pass by, wondering where he could be, but they just accepted the idea that he must have vanished. No one ever truly came looking for him. He was simply abandoned inside the necklace. While the imp was abandoned, Jake abandoned his friends. But he said that Jake is not a monster. Not everything in life goes as planned, and it wasn't the abandonment that made him bitter. They simply accepted that the worst had happened and moved on. That's what bothers him about the memory, until he became a distant memory. That's where Jake can be different. The problem is that the young man didn't want to find out that his friends might no longer be alive. Cecil said he could deal with that when the time came, but there was still hope. His friends might need him. Jake remembered when he had said he had his own goals in that place, advising his friends to stick together to increase their chances of survival, and that they shouldn't worry about him because he'd be in touch. Remembering these things makes him start to feel remorse for his actions. Standing up, he said that Cecil was absolutely right. He has been running from his problems for too long. He decided he would find Adam and settle things once and for all. As soon as day broke, they set off. Cecil wanted to know if he even knew which way to go. They had been walking for many hours, and all they had found were a few creatures, very hungry creatures at that. Jake told his friend to stop complaining because he had received a health potion and would be fine. But that couldn't heal emotional trauma, which made the young man laugh quite a bit. The truth is, He has no idea where the camp is, but if they follow the river, they'll find it eventually. That place is used for fishing, and for washing clothes too. Besides being a source of drinking water, every civilization needs a water source. Cecil said his friend seems like a real hunter, but after a month in this place, it's impossible not to learn a few things. The little creature is curious to know if his friend already has a speech prepared. Before that, he'll need to watch the camp for a while, because Casper was already developing some traps before he left. And if he has progressed as much as Jake has, it could be problematic, because he'd be walking into a minefield. Cecil reminded him that despite the difficulties, he was going to talk to his friends. He should think less about conflict and more about dialogue. And indeed, some of those people really are his friends, while others there are worse than enemies. If he gets a chance to talk to Adam, he can sort things out, as he's being framed for something he didn't do. The problem is if he doesn't get lucky in his endeavor, because then he'll have a situation much more complicated than just a few traps. All they can do is hope for the best. Mid-journey, he stopped abruptly. Cecil asked what was wrong, but the young man told him to be quiet. Pointing in one direction, he asked if Cecil saw it too. It's as if there's an invisible curtain in front of them. It's slightly translucent, as if made of water, but the young man claims it's magic. His perception gets distorted when he tries to look through it, a sign that it's a magical barrier. It was made to keep intruders out, or in the worst case scenario, to keep something trapped inside. Right now, they don't have the answer they're looking for, but wanting to find out, he decided he would cross the barrier. Cecil stopped him, saying they didn't know if it was possible to get back out. He could get stuck inside and never find his friends. Sighing deeply, the young man acknowledged that this was also a possibility. He decided he wanted to focus on his friends first and solve the mystery of this barrier later. He'd really like to know what's inside, imagining it's some hideous creature. He finally managed to find the camp. Cecil praised his friend's perception, because from there he couldn't see a thing. What he can observe are several people complaining about their morning routines. The houses are very well built. It seems they even have a blacksmith. Looking at a table with some girls, he was very impressed. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. Joanna's leg had been completely restored. From what he told Cecil, she was also an old friend of his. He was there when she was ambushed on the first night of the tutorial. He was unable to save her in time. Even so, Caroline found a way to heal her. Cecil was glad to see his friend smiling. It's good to see familiar faces. If she's alive, it's possible the others are too. All he needs now is to find Adam. The young man had just woken up and was still sleepy. He thought he wouldn't wake Caroline now. There are only 25 days left until the tutorial finally ends. He believes that after this period, life will return to normal. He has a hunt to go on in a few hours. He thought about going to the blacksmith before that. Outside, he saw that everyone was already awake and working. He hopes today will be a quiet day as well. His gaze was suddenly caught by something. It was an arrow flying in his direction. It landed at his feet. He noticed that a scroll seemed to be wrapped around the shaft of the projectile. He immediately took it in his hands. Reading the message, he was stunned. It was a message from Jake, who wanted to meet with him. The boy received a system message that he had defeated a colossal bat. Several of these creatures are chasing him now. He manages to defeat a few more and remains engaged in combat. With his new spear, he can defeat the creatures with ease. They're overpowered as if they were nothing, showing he's completely unhinged. He clearly enjoys what he's doing. The creatures' bodies fall to the ground, completely inert. He spent the entire morning hunting creatures and testing his new ability. Despite the hardships, this is the life he prayed for. Covered in the creature's ichor, he's never felt stronger. Before, he would have washed up before returning to camp, but now that he has Richard's support, he doesn't care. It's no problem if he looks a little scary. His naive act no longer fools anyone, and now, he also wields great power. Inside the camp, he began to wonder where everyone was, since there are usually many people around. It seems they're all gathered inside a cabin. Something might be happening inside Caroline's tent, but he doesn't need to act like he cares just yet. If it's anything interesting, Richard will let him know. Inside, they are all having a meeting. Placing the arrow on the table, the young man said someone tried to attack Adam, but he said it wasn't an attack, but a message. One in which Jake says he'd like to meet him. Richard took the arrow. He said his gut tells him this could be a trap, but if he wanted to kill him, he would have done it. Adam truly believes it's just about a talk and a peace negotiation. Richard finds that hard to believe. It's possible the boy knows he's being hunted, and that's why he wants to talk. But Richard is the one who wants to hunt him, and he thinks the boy wants to make the first move. The woman didn't want things to resort to violence, but someone says the boy started it. She didn't know him very well, but never felt he was a bad person. On the first night, he was the one who managed to protect her. Caroline doesn't believe he was saving her either. He might have just been looking for a thrill. Richard respectfully asked them to leave the cabin. Joanna and Bertram are valuable members of the camp, but too many people in here could complicate the conversation. He wanted to keep the matter between himself, Caroline, and Adam. The young young man agreed, but stated he would keep his friends informed on the matter. Finally, they were alone. Even though they were friends, he couldn't risk losing his best healer. Then Adam stated he would go there alone, but Caroline said he wouldn't do that. Either they go together, or he's not going. Richard doesn't want to let them walk into the boys' trap. Adam is a role model for the others here, but he's not a killer. He isn't fit to deal with someone capable of wiping out entire squads on his own. They can meet near the camp. If things get complicated, he can escape. Richard called him a fool for risking his life for a teammate, but he knows his friend well, and he has been helping out at the camp. So he asked for just one chance and some trust. Knowing the two of them had collaborated from the beginning, he started to suspect that Adam might also be an enemy. Caroline separated the two, asking them to calm down. She asked Adam to go outside and calm down the rest of his friends. The truth is, the young man needed to calm down too. He was visibly distraught. Agreeing with her, he decided to leave the cabin. His friends wanted to know how the conversation went. He said it was terrible, but he was going to meet Jake anyway. Bertram is worried about him, as he also thinks the idea of going into the forest alone is too risky. But he's known his friend for years and feels that something isn't right about this. But they saw what the boy was capable of on the first night. He'd already taken out dozens of Richard's men, but if his friend really trusts him, he should believe what he said about Jake. Caroline came out of the cabin and told him they could meet Jake the next day because she had convinced Richard. Adam doesn't know what she did to manage that. As the best healer in the place, she has her privileges. It was either they go or she leaves. Adam is very impressed that she negotiated that way. She may have had a falling out with Jake, but she doesn't think the boy is a degenerate. And if this is important to him, it's important to her too. Adam, extremely grateful, is happy now. Hugging him, she said she would stay with him until the very end. Richard is dying of jealousy. Deep down in his heart, he dreams of the blonde every day. The only question is, which blonde? Following the instructions, there is a large rock along the path. After a small stream, a cut tree stump. Jake believes he must have reached the right place. Cecil wondered why his friends would choose such a place. Probably because they didn't want to stray too far from the camp and wander through the forest. They must also be thinking they could be attacked and would want an escape route. That's when Cecil pointed out that being a pessimist was his job. His friend should be more positive. He knows he can trust the others, but he can't deny they've been inside Richard's camp for a while now, long enough to make the others distrust him. His friends might have already chosen a side. Cecil hopes not, because that guy is the worst kind of lunatic, not to mention dangerous. Jake said he should stay in the necklace, as he doesn't know what will happen and can't guarantee his safety. He agreed, but hoped his friend wouldn't lose his life and leave him trapped in there again. Touching his hand, he said he would do his best. Finally, he went back inside the necklace. Walking through the forest, they asked Adam what the plan was. First, he warned the young man not to grip the hilt of his sword. They weren't looking for a fight. He apologized, stating they were a bit on edge. Adam said he would lead the conversation and keep things civil. No one was to draw weapons or cast spells. This is just a conversation between teammates. Jake was already at the designated spot. It was time for the talk to begin. They approached the boy, who looked very mysterious. Jake removes his hood and greets him with a wide smile. Adam apologized for the delay, noticing his friend already looked very different. He said he'd been working out in the meantime. Even though he was stronger, he felt his friend was still the same ball of nerves. Closer to him, they started to chat casually, but there was still a lot of apprehension in the air. Jake also wants to know how his friends are doing. Adam said everything is fine at the camp. Meanwhile, Caroline felt that everyone was a bit strange, and since he was summoned there, he wants to know what's going on. He said he was approached by people in the forest accusing him of things he didn't do. Interrupting the conversation, Caroline wants to know how many people he's killed. Adam didn't like that, but she insisted he answer. Indeed, there were many, but not enough to start a war. Bertram is also wary and wishes the archer wouldn't lie. That's when he stated that everything he did was to protect himself. Apparently, he doesn't sound at all like William's description. They expected him to act deceitful and violent. Slowly, they are coming to the conclusion that William is a huge liar. Jake wanted to know what that clown had said about him. They know the two of them had a run-in. Jake said that clown tried to intercept him when he was going to meet them. He recommended that Adam not believe him because the guy is completely crazy. He already had his suspicions, suspecting he was the one who ended Casper's life. Upon hearing this, Jake became emotional. That's what they believe. They're surprised Jake didn't know yet. Every night, he looks at the number of survivors, wondering if his friends are still alive. But he felt a great sense of relief when he saw Joanna was still alive while watching the camp. He felt that if she was able to survive, it was a sign they all had made it too. With tears in his eyes, he hadn't expected Casper to be gone already. Even though he was emotional, he made sure to say he was still okay. Caroline now thought this was a terrible idea. They should have never come here. Adam wants to know what's wrong. She said he should have stayed home, but now it's too late. Jake sensed another person was with them. A rustling can be heard from the middle of the bush. He reaches for his quiver cover to grab his arrows. With his bow drawn, he warned that there's no point in hiding since he already knows they're there. Adam tried to stop his friend, but Richard had already revealed himself. He acknowledged that the young man's perception was extremely sharp. With his sword over his shoulder, he said he was happy to see him. Furious at his appearance, Jake asked if his friend had set him up, but Adam denied it. Richard confirmed the young man's words. He knew nothing. He couldn't count on Adam for this, as he would have ruined his entire plan. Adam soon realized his companion was actually a great traitor. She tried to apologize, but he was completely distraught for being deceived. If he had listened to the stories, he would have doubted him too. Everyone said Jake is a monster. He heard everything they were saying about him, yet he still chose to trust his friend. But this mediocre woman decided to trust other people. Richard told him to come along and they would resolve this whole situation. If he's done nothing wrong, they could just put this all behind them. He might even forget that Jake took out his archer when they first met. With his keen instincts, he can feel that this man's intention to do evil is great. He's absolutely certain that he's lying. He ordered him to tell the others to leave so they could talk. Adam didn't know other people were there. Hayden revealed himself with his men, praising the hunter's skills. Both of them were cooperating on this little project. This whole meeting was a trap, and Adam feels used. They are surrounded on all sides. Jake is furious for letting all these people surround him. Richard said he will only ask one more time as he wants to know if the archer will surrender. He doesn't know what to do, as there's no escape route. Hayden has already lost his patience and decided to cast a spell. He launched a devastating fireball at the archer. A huge explosion erupts, but he was able to dodge it. As soon as he landed back on the ground, he fired his first arrow. It whistles through the air towards its target, but the mage was able to create a shield. Richard ordered the warriors to stay back. Meanwhile, the old man told the mages to surround their victim. Placing their hands on the ground, they began to prepare a powerful spell. Jake felt the ground being torn apart. This situation is definitely terrible. Hayden says he won't escape this time, launching another attack. A massive explosion occurs, but Jake had vanished, as if he had teleported. He reappeared on a broken tree stump. Adam asked Richard to stop the attack, but to the hard-headed man, this is the only way. He tried to talk to the woman he can't trust to get her to do something, because at this rate, they are going to hurt his friend. Caroline said there's nothing she can do now. The archers are already preparing a new volley of arrows, and the mages don't stop attacking either. The intention is to make him start to get tired. They should use everything they have to finish this guy off. Richard also encourages his men to do the same. Inside the necklace, Cecil began to worry. His friend needs to get out of there immediately. There's not much he can do. There are too many attacks to keep dodging, and one of those mages is blocking his shadow walking ability. The circle is closing in, and he can't use teleportation. It was then that he noticed one of his feet was already trapped. The situation was getting worse and worse. Richard ordered the archers to attack now. Arrows begin to fly through the air. Jake wasn't able to dodge all of them and was hit by one. Another one pierces through his leg. The young man was now wounded and completely immobilized. He furiously screams for them to let him out of there. Richard prepares to finally take our boy's life. Adam tries to do something to spare his friend's life. Cecil is also desperate about how events are unfolding. Standing before him, Richard said it's all over now. Jake tries to break free from his restraints, but he doesn't have the strength. The sword is about to become intimately acquainted with his neck. Jake was almost accepting his fate. There was nothing he could do in this situation, even after all the battles he had won, or the monsters he had defeated along the way. He wasn't able to overcome a betrayal. He just hopes someone can find the necklace and free his friend who is inside. It seems he had met his end. Finally, the system announces that he has achieved the primitive hunter's moment, a bloodline ability. He looks at the message, not understanding a thing, but he had achieved an evolution as a human. Feeling his body change, he has no idea what this is. His heart is beating faster and faster. His instincts are taking control of his body. The second he is living through is taking a whole eternity. Now he can feel all the mana that surrounds him. It's like a pool being filled deep inside his gut. Now there's only one thing he can do. Let all this power find its way out. A shockwave forms, pushing the assholes away from him, and Richard was one of the fools thrown far away. Jake screamed, and his body was emanating a great power. The fools just watch what is happening. Hayden began to imagine it could be some kind of magic. Jake is now able to free himself from his bonds, and he finally got to his feet. Adam is impressed by what he just witnessed, but he no longer knows what his friend has become. Caroline, who at this point should be forbidden from having an opinion, believes the rumors about Jake. He had truly become a monster. Richard told them not to be afraid, as a single man couldn't be a match for all of them. He ordered his men to attack immediately. The small army of fodder advances to its certain doom. While Jake slowly draws his daggers, he takes a moment to catch his breath. His steps are so fast, they are almost imperceptible. The first grunt just got his one-way ticket to the afterlife. The second one also received a ticket for the same ride. The same happened to the third, who didn't even realize his chest had been sliced open. All this was done so quickly that they are only now discovering they are no longer alive. Seeing he would be the next to die, the man ordered his men to form a defensive line. Grunts armed with swords and shields obeyed the command, but Jake went right over them without any difficulty. Carrying vials of poison, he dropped one on each of the grunts. They were hit hard by the poison. They begin to suffer from the effects of the substance, while the primitive hunter strikes a hero's pose. The poison is truly powerful. The men are melting like plastic soldiers under the sun. Adam began to get terrified by the repulsive scene. None of the men there were able to stop him. They are losing their lives for nothing. Hayden, full of ignorance and courage, believes he can stop him. He wanted to keep this spell hidden for an emergency. Sprouting wings like a diseased pigeon, he admits he has no other options. Charging to attack, he said he won't let Jake escape. The hunter realized this mage is incredibly fast. He had to make some evasive maneuvers. Those wings are now really dangerous. If he hadn't dodged them, he would be in serious trouble, and maybe missing a few limbs. The old man said he can't run and should give up as soon as possible. Indeed, his speed can't keep up with him, and reinforcements will soon arrive to interfere with the fight. His only chance to get out of there is by using the shadow walk. This time he hopes the ability will work. Cecil warned him that there's some kind of barrier in this place. Finally, the hunter realized he'd been contained. He has no idea who's doing this, but there was an apology. Caroline is truly a mediocre trader. She has no choice now. She's in way too deep.